new.
It was like it popped up on the.
Yeah. Well, we did a resolution at our last meeting.
Yeah. I just didn't.
Yep. So it's October, I know. I know, my son asked me, he goes,
Right out there.
it really
That
is.
screen doesn't do much. 83 degrees today in October. I think I'm getting on a boat tomorrow, man. A lot of people still have their sitting in a slip. They haven't packed them up yet. I don't know about getting in the water, but at least riding around the boat. I think there's definitely a plate. Summer golfing.
I'm not talking.
What'd you have?
I had
Was talking about
no, I had a two.
No.
I thought that I had a crown.
Oh, the Huron Hills.
you just do it this weekend? Or?
Today, 3 hours ago.
Be nice to you. I'm always
You're
nice to
always
you.
my answers might be short.
No, that sucks. You know. So what they do? Just take the whole road out?
Yeah, they
too?
took the whole thing.
I
Implant?
feel like this is a
Yeah,
congressional
well,
hearing.
actually, I was thinking for the bottom tooth, he was like, well, now that you have some space before I like
Yeah.
implant and put it in permanently, you could straighten out your bottom tooth, so I might go do that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Marlene's gonna text you, she didn't know she needed to stay for the regular meeting. I told her no, but I'll check with
Yeah, everybody's emptying my bags.
Terry is 4. Ben not back there? Or the little girl?
Ben's here. Yeah, he's
Terry? I'd like to call the Saline City Council work meeting to order at 6:01 PM on October the 2nd. Members present this evening are council members Kamara Sulak, CO, Delorco, Gearbaugh, Rice, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and Mayor Marl. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, Deputy Parks and Rec Director Lambert, City Treasurer Cole. I believe that is it. Oh, actually, no, we have, you want to introduce your other staff members that we have with us this evening? At least 2, it looks like.
We have Stephanie Ferguson, our recreation manager, Jody Roberts, retired, and current front desk staff. We have a lifeguard, Linda Smith, retired from the school. I think that's all the staff.
Very good. Excellent. We do have some members of our Rec Center Sustainability Task Force also with us this evening. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
so moved.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Kamara Sulak. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we'll proceed directly to citizen comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any person may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Is there anyone who wishes to speak regarding a forthcoming discussion on a rec center feasibility study? Easy enough. Then we will transition to the one and only discussion item of the evening, which is the Saline Rec Center Needs Assessment and Feasibility Study. Director Scruggs, before I turn it over to you and our guest, I want to just preface by saying a few items. One, these discussions that we're going to initiate this evening will likely need to continue at a subsequent meeting or meetings. This is a lot of high-level stuff and a lot of comprehensive data, and we have a number of people that I want to hear from before we entertain questions and concerns from the dais. I would ask that we sort of divide tonight's presentation into 3 very clear categories. So one is what steps are being taken in the immediate future to generate additional revenue or to save dollars at the rec center. Subsequent, what are some of the low-hanging fruit that you, your staff, and community stakeholders have identified in this report that, if done, would improve the viability of the rec center? And then the third category, I want to be really clear on this point, that there are some things in this document that are very aspirational, that unless there's a huge infusion of additional cash and resources are likely not to happen in the next probably 2 to 5 years. Doesn't mean they're not important, doesn't mean we can't aim to accomplish some of these things in the next decade, but they're not low-hanging fruit, to use that term. So any questions from me, Director Scruggs, before we kick it off? Yes, sir. And maybe you could introduce our guests and also the members of the Rec Center Sustainability Task Force.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yep, pull it close and just make sure that the green light is illuminated at the base. It's on.
Okay. Excellent. First of all, thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to present at this work session tonight. I'm going to make introductions in just a second, but back in quite a while ago, last October, the Rec Center Task Force made its second presentation, and one of the directives that came from the task force was to secure a consulting firm to conduct a feasibility study. And in January of this year, City Council, you did approve that to hire Barry Dunn to do this study. So tonight we're pleased to have, we have Pat O'Toole, who is with Barry Dunn. He'll be doing the presentation. Obviously you've met Sunshine Lambert, Deputy Director. And part of our rec task force, we have Greg Hohenberger, who is the Director at Canton Township. And we also have Paul Heineck, who is a community member and former school board member.
And in addition to the 4 of you, I served on the task force along with Councilmember Gearbaugh and City Manager O'Toole.
Yes, and we also have Chris Wingate, who was not able to be here this evening.
Former Parks Director from the City of Milan,
Right.
who also offered some perspective and insight. We appreciate that. Very good.
And then, if you don't mind, I'd like Paul Heineck to make a comment on behalf of the Rec Task Force.
Please.
So just a little bit of history. Back in March of 2021.
Can I stop you real quick, Paul? Ben, can we up the volume on the microphones in front of us? Okay.
Better?
Yeah, go ahead.
So back in March of 2021, Council authorized the Saline Area Rec Center Task Force. And our charge was basically coming out of the pandemic to discover ways to, number one, bring the rec center back to full membership. And in the meantime, look for ways to improve the rec center. We did some tours of other rec centers. And one of the main outcomes of that task force was to do a feasibility study, because we think that the rec center is a integral part of the city of Saline. I think people will support it with some of the things that you'll see tonight in the feasibility study. The study itself is very deep and comprehensive. There's a lot of good data in there that I encourage you to read over and consider. And I think with some other initiatives going on that I am aware of in town about, quote unquote, selling the city of Saline in cooperation with Saline Area Schools, I think the rec center would be a critical part of that as well. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Heineck. Appreciate that. Director Scruggs, are we turning over to our guest from Barry Dunn?
That's correct.
Yeah. Mr. O'Toole, before you get started with the presentation, I think for the council's benefit and the public's, can you talk to us for maybe just a minute, maybe 2 minutes, about Barry Dunn, your experience, history, and the work that the company's done over the past couple decades?
Yes. My name's Pat O'Toole. I am a manager with Barry Dunn. Background on Barry Dunn, we have a park, recreation, and libraries consulting wing of a very large firm of 1,000 people, but our consulting firm's about 32 people. most of which come from the park and rec sector, the public sector, prior to consulting. I personally was a director and assistant director of 4 different agencies, 4 different types of agencies in 4 different states in the Midwest. And that was the first 20 years of my career, and then I've been consulting for almost 30 years since 1995. So this is what we do all over the country. We do park and rec master plans, we do strategic plans, and we do feasibility studies on just about every type of recreation facility. So that's kind of our background. And myself and another manager, Teresa Jackson from Barry Dunn, were the ones that run project here. And then we had a architectural firm as a sub-consulting BRS.
Very good.
Okay.
Excellent. Appreciate the background. It's very helpful.
Okay, I'm going to start the presentation. We're basically going to look at operational analysis, needs assessment, and the concept plan and recommendations. On our internal engagement, we asked what could we improve? What was that low-hanging fruit, the things that could be improved, and kind of put them in short-term and a long-term vision. And I'm going to concentrate mostly on the aquatic stuff tonight because that's what we deemed as by far the highest priority by everybody we talked to, by all the evidence in the needs assessment and the feasibility study. And they rose to the top. So the short term was the pool deck and surfing surface needed to be repaired. And then in the little longer term, which we are looking at that option phase 1, updating the pool and bringing in family features and looking at the locker rooms to expand those, bring in some family change rooms that are a little more gender neutral, which is a big trend right now in facilities and schools and what have you. Looking at the membership trends, as you see, they went down based on the COVID. They have rebounded, but not quite back to the largest years of fiscal year 17-18. I believe they are still down 500 memberships, which is 30% down, even though they've gained 700 memberships from the low point of the COVID era. The membership revenue, which follows the same curve on number of memberships, is, as you can see, dipped down. It's come back. It's still $270,000 a year, shy of what it was in 17-18. Again, due to those 500 less. But it is on the rebound, bringing in an additional $500,000 from fiscal year 2021. Revenue by program category. This is the different colors are the different years that we've shown throughout the slides here. And what I want to bring up here is, as the mayor talked about low-hanging fruit, with absolutely no physical changes to the facility, revenue by program is up. So it has, if you look at the rec leagues, they came up after COVID, not quite to the level they were pre-COVID. You look at classes, they jumped this fiscal year, the 22-23, quite a bit and almost up to where they were. And then rec programs, they have exceeded where they were back in 2017 and 18. So as the mayor talked about, that low-hanging fruit, those operational things that can be done without any physical change of facility, at least in our opinion, even during this feasibility study, the rec staff has done a good job bringing that back up. So in actual numbers, if you add all those numbers together, rec programs is up $51,000 a year over the best year that you've had, which is a plus 22% over that best year they've had. Expenses. If you really look at this, expenses over these last 6 years have only increased 4%. When we look at what inflation's done over the last 6 years, it's plus 25%. So what we consider to be one of the best cost recovery schemes and tactics is cost avoidance. So I think they've done an excellent job in holding the expenses down, probably to bare minimum for operation in that 4% climb over the last 6 fiscal years. And then everything points to the cost recovery that we've kind of gone through the components of that. So the dark columns here are revenue over the last 6 years, and the green is expenses, and the difference listed there. So $211,000 shy of, again, breaking even, whereas, you know, you had 2 years pre-COVID where the revenues were higher than the expenses. But again, gaining on that in the last 2 years. Okay, a large portion of what we looked at was a needs assessment, where we looked at a service area, and what we chose based on the area, based on the type of facility, was a 20-minute drive time. And this slide just basically goes through what those populations have done since the year 2000, 2010, 2022, and then projected not much change before 2027. Within that 20-minute drive time, these are the age breakdowns. We found the largest one to be young adults, 20 to 34, and they make up about 30% of that. Older adults, 75 plus, is only 9%. And the youth, which is broken down into a separate wheel there, shows the different types of youth. So what this really lends itself to is one of the largest markets out there to go after, which I wouldn't consider it a new market, but it's certainly a market that can grow based on what's coming to the facility now, is families. We held an awful lot of focus groups and stakeholder interviews while we were here at the start of this, gaining information, asking people what they liked, what they didn't like, what they thought the changes should be. And again, what we saw rise to the top was mostly about the pool. So, you know, the top 4 bullets, you know, add kids' leisure pool alternatives and zero entry, which you don't have now. Renovate the pool deck, update the locker rooms, and modernize for the next 30 years. We also did a survey, and what we found from the survey, we had 124 respondents. 73% of those were users, 27% were non-users. 43 of the respondents maintain a family membership, and 15% maintain a senior membership. So very strong holding on to membership through the COVID years, even though the revenues and expenses, and we saw that nationally as far as a trend. We also asked the questions about, do you think that the rec center should be renovated, and 73% felt like it should be. 43% felt like it meets their current needs. So people are somewhat satisfied with it based on what they use. We found that the fitness folks were much more satisfied than the aquatics folks. Most valuable part of my rec center membership is, and the unlimited use of the aquatic center was the highest, unlimited use of the cardio room and free weights, and then the free fitness classes with a membership were the top 3. Which 3 facility areas do you feel most needed improvements? We asked them to not just pick everything, but to list their top 3 so that we could determine which ones kind of rose to the top. And it was aquatic center and the locker rooms and the lobby. We also did some in-person engagement stations that the Parks and Rec Department did themselves, where we had boxes with asking people questions, and we gave them coins and said, if it was your money, where would you spend it and how would you spend it? So they could put them all in one box, or they could spread it out evenly, or anything in between. And again, aquatics rose way above everything else as far as where they would spend their money. We looked at the market and gap analysis, looking at aquatic centers. So within that 20-mile drive time, there were 62 facilities that we looked at and compared. 17 of those were aquatic centers, 45 were fitness and gyms. Nearly all locations provided a traditional rectangle pool. So that isn't the anomaly here. And as our phase one recommendation is to put in a family leisure pool, there's only the opportunities designed for play are limited in the area, particularly indoors, for families and kids, and that zero entry for the youngsters. There were 26 small gyms identified, so we looked at all the different sizes and amenities. Mid-sized gyms, there was about 13 of those. And there's really only 6 large gyms identified in the survey that would match up with the rec center or be comparable to. In addition to evaluating those centers, we looked at pricing models, what they charge for memberships, and their fees for classes, what have you. And we found out that of the 45 fitness centers evaluated, only one other facility identified as a large with the low price. So there was other large, but had a higher price. We had $20 to $40 a month as low price. Moderately priced was $41 to $60 a month, and high price between $61 and $100. Of the 19 aquatic facilities evaluated, only 11 offer year-round opportunities. The rest are outdoor pools. So again, just hitting on the high points. Based on that information and all the information we have in the report, we asked BRS architects to draw up renovation plans, and we went through several different models before we kind of boiled it down to some phasing. And again, looking at priorities, we looked at the criteria for what was asked in the feasibility study. Number 1 was raising revenue. Number 2, providing new program opportunities. Number 3 was improving operational efficiency. 4, reducing maintenance. And 5, improve sustainability. So you can see by the colors which ones rank the highest down to the lowest. And again, expand aquatics and renovate pool. Add multi-use space was second, and then repurpose the racquetball courts. Those types of things are more long-term in subsequent phases. So the only thing in phase 1 that we have is the renovation at the pool and the locker rooms. So the concept plan, option 1, phase 1, shows the areas that would be renovated in the building. So the 2 locker rooms will be flip-flopped, adding more family change rooms, the gender-neutral areas, and adding a little square footage down there to accommodate the family leisure pool as the main appointment, but to totally replace the other pool, the lap pool. So this is kind of what the concept looks like. 1,200 square foot. The 6-lane lap pool would remain the same, but be renovated via new tub and the decking surface that needs to be replaced regardless of what you do. And then the zero depth entry in the lazy river, also having areas for swim lessons and what have you that you see at the bottom there. And a couple of pictures that kind of show you what types of features that would bring into the facility. So if the city does select to go with phase 1, the projected cost of what we're showing is between $6.8 million and $7.3 million. This phase is anticipated to yield 700 additional memberships. Again, the break-even point to prior to COVID would be 500 memberships. The membership increase is projected to generate about 280,000. Again, 212,000 would get it up to that level that was pre-COVID. And with the effective marketing, we would anticipate by the 3rd year after the renovation that membership would range somewhere between 2,500 and 3,200. And it does have the capacity to hold that. So again, based on all that, the recommendations, which, some of which falls into exactly what the mayor was talking about, plan for capital improvements, prioritize membership sales and growth, and some areas to do that based again on the demographics we looked at. Recommendation 3 was to pursue partnership opportunities, which has already been happening, and implement operational improvements, which likewise has already been happening, to again move those program revenues high and to hold their expenses down where they have been. So with that, I think we're open for discussion and questions.
Director Scruggs, Deputy Director Lambert, is there anything that you'd like to add at this time? Maybe some specific messaging on some cost savings measures and as well as ways to generate some additional revenue to the facility?
Yeah, I can take that.
Please.
So some of our current implementations for generating revenue and cutting some costs, we've been working diligently on a lot of our programs, and I know Pat spoke about that. Our programs have been doing quite well. We see a lot of people coming out, but we've created some new partnerships. We have a new soccer contract. We have new personal trainers. I know that was one of those goals that we had when we were meeting with the rec task force, is to reinvigorate the personal training. So we've definitely brought in new personal trainers. We met with another person today. Some of our other initiatives have been to grow our swim lesson program. We have a new contractor that we're working with. We also recently partnered with the schools to do an adaptive swim lesson program, which is, the first session went off really, really well. And we've had the request to continue doing that. So that's some of our programming that we've done. The staff has been meeting about doing, we have some ideas for membership promotion. Obviously, that's our number one. We need to focus on bringing up our memberships. So we have some, everything from looking at our special events and marketing straight to those participants. We identified that 80% of the people who come to our events are non-members of the rec center. So through some of our own research, that's a great opportunity for us to, identify those individuals and do some marketing straight to them with some maybe promotions. We're looking in December to do some promotions for new memberships, and then later that month to work with our current members to encourage them to renew early before the new year. So those are some of the things that we're doing. Some other cost savings areas. As you all know, we have, Carla's going to be retiring soon. So that's an opportunity. We've looked at those cost savings from her salary, and then taking a look at, bringing somebody else in will come in much lower, so an entry-level position. So that would offer us some significant savings there. And I would like to, I think Pat really hit it. We've been very frugal on our spending. So we look at every item, that comes through for our expenditures. We evaluate that, and if we need to do something, we will. But if it's something that can be held off, we do hold off on that. So, Carla, is there anything else to add?
Well, you kind of hit on all of those things that we were talking about. Some of the additional partnerships that we've created with renting facilities, we've been doing a lot more of that. And you did mention the school adaptive program. We're actually on our third session. They keep selling out, and we're working with them to use the facility for that program. I see opportunity for some additional programming with the schools, partnering with them on that. And again, staff has, like our birthday party program has been kind of going off the charts. Stephanie, who's here tonight, has created some nice partnerships with Buff City Soap, with, we have a Lego guy that does Lego parties. She created some Mario Kart parties. Some other really creative things that are drawing more people into the facility. And just to reiterate what Sunshine said, is taking advantage of those opportunities with those people that aren't members coming into the facility to offer them or extend some type of a membership promotion to encourage them to become members. And I think there is, with a lot of growth in the area, a lot of new housing developments, there's definitely a lot of opportunity to create more opportunity for members to come in. So that's where our focus needs to be.
Very good. Before we open up for questions, I do want to provide a brief opportunity for all the members of the Rec Center Sustainability Task Force to make a comment or provide some perspective. Greg, this is obviously what you do as on a day-to-day basis. This is your vocation, your expertise. Is there anything you'd like to add at this time before we have questions from my council colleagues?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. Number one, thanks for the opportunity for this. I am a local resident. I live in Pittsfield Township. I was my first job out of college was working at the rec center for Carla, so it's going to be bittersweet to see Carla run off into retirement on us here, so congratulations to her. And I also worked with Pat and his company on a similar feasibility study for the Summit on the Park in Canton, and we're just about to implement phase one. We're doing some pool renovations right now, and I'm starting to see the benefits of some of these renovations and the excitement that it brings to the community by having new updated facilities. I think one of the challenges, well, number one, obviously we know a lot of people choose communities for different reasons, right? Saline is known as a safe, small community, well tight-knit, safe, great schools, but we also have good parks, good facilities, but the rec center is certainly a dated facility. And it's kind of at that point where the city is needing to make a decision of, are we going to invest in this facility and make it part of the community and make it what this community deserves, or are we going to continue to just kind of kick the can down the road and make it what it is and live with what it is? Because until there are updates to that facility, I think we are going to struggle to convert some of those people that are coming into the facility to purchase a membership. I have a 7-year-old son right now, and when he says, "Dad, I want to go swimming," he wants to go to the Summit on the Park in Canton because we have a water slide and a lazy river and some other things like that. And I'd much rather drive 5 minutes down the road to the Saline Rec Center because it's a lot more convenient for me. So those are the types of things that are going to bring families in, some of these new modern things that have dated facility. But I would like to compliment the city council and the mayor for taking on an extensive study like this, because it is an investment in staff time, an investment in funds in the feasibility study, and taking the time to do the due diligence and not just a knee-jerk reaction saying that we've got to cut costs, we've got to cut costs, we've got to cut costs. There's a lot more to running a successful community center than just cutting costs or just doing this or just doing that. You've got to have a creative staff, and you can tell that they're doing a fantastic job of bringing the community in, reinvigorating the community and new programs and those sorts of things to really drive participation post-COVID, which is a fantastic job on their part, so compliments to them. And I'd just like to really encourage the city council to take a deep look. I know it's hard there's a ton of things that as city council members you get asked to spend money on. But know that this is a critical piece as to why people choose Saline. Why are people going to move to Saline instead of Dexter, instead of Milan? They don't have a rec center. They don't have parks. They have good schools. But what sets us apart? And hopefully this is one of those things.
Very good. Greg, thank you. Paul, we appreciated your introductory remarks, but is there anything you'd like to add to the discussion at this time?
I'd just like to quickly say I've spent the better part of the last 40 years analyzing and paying healthcare claims. And the wellness factor that the rec center could provide if we do the right things, put other things there, will pay off dividends for everyone. And there was a little study that if everyone walked their steps every day, we'd save billions of dollars in healthcare costs. So I think that perspective of a wellness type center and improving the facility will pay off in the end for everyone.
Very good. I appreciate those remarks. Real quick, City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to add about the process of the report?
No, nothing.
Councilmember Gearbaugh?
No, I just want to thank all the individuals that have participated in the task force, especially from the perspective of your expertise and actually showing us all the other facilities and what other communities have done and what they face and the similar type of concerns that we have. So thank you very much.
Before I turn it over to my first colleague for questions, let me just say that I've participated in a number of independent analyses and evaluations of various city services during both my tenure as mayor and as a council member for 4 years, and I think this is perhaps one of the most comprehensive and in-depth. I think the process was very thorough and inclusive, and I think it yielded some really interesting feedback for my council colleagues and I to consider. So I thank you and Carla and her staff and all the community members, not only for attending tonight, but for those who provided us feedback and insight on how we can improve the viability and vitality of our municipally owned recreation center. Again, this dialogue will not conclude tonight, but will continue at a subsequent meeting. We do have less than a half hour, so I'm going to keep everyone to a strict 5-minute time limit on questions. I believe that the most recent meetings have been starting to my right, so I'm going to start to my left with Council Member Rice. You'll have 5 minutes, and if you know who your question is going to be directed to, it might be best to articulate that, but you use your time how you deem appropriate. You will have 5 minutes, and it begins now.
Thanks so much. I guess the thing that I would like to talk about tonight is, if we go all the way to the bottom, Appendix D, financial strategies. You know, I'm not surprised by anything at the beginning of this document. I hear this from the community all the time. We want splash pads, we want better aquatic facilities, things like that. We need to refresh, things like that. But let's talk about financial strategies. You have a lot of information in here that's pretty common and pretty general, and maybe this question is for Carla and Sunshine. Have you all discussed any of these strategies and how, if we were to move forward with any of these renovations or things like that, what you would try to pursue as far as, you know, grants, partnerships, sponsorships, things like that? Or do we perhaps need an additional financial/marketing study to go along with this?
I think that obviously we would want to pursue as many opportunities as possible. You know, we would investigate or hopefully have some type of a task force or a group to study some of those opportunities, whether it's grants, foundations, you know, bonds, whatever, you know, naming opportunities, things like that. Barry Dunn has provided a very extensive list in the study of different ways or opportunities that are available. We've reviewed those, and there was a lot more available that didn't really make sense here in Michigan. So, you know, we would do whatever it takes to get that money. We'd like to do the whole shooting match.
Yeah, I would be interested, you know, in more concrete, this is, you know, what's available out there, this is what we could, you know, potentially go for. Do we need someone to sit down and, you know, fully scope this out? You know, do we need to hire a consultant to look into specific grant money, things like that? I think my gut reaction to this is more money from the taxpayer for the rec center, question mark. So my gut reaction is let's look at this from a where else can money come from standpoint before we even remotely discuss whether or not this is something that we want to pursue. I mean, it's all, yes, I agree with all of these outcomes, but how do we do it?
Yeah, I think that would be kind of phase 2 of what we're doing with, you know, the needs assessment and feasibility study. That was not part of what this study was supposed to do, but I would imagine we would have to work hard to, you know, kind of create all of the different opportunities available to us, whether it's through Michigan DNR, you know, grants or federal grants. I'm sure there's other local grants that I'm not aware of, but that we could benefit from.
You mentioned that you have some partnerships going already. Have you worked with the healthcare task force at all in any of the healthcare partnerships potentially?
Yeah, I just recently attended the healthcare task force. I think it was last week. So yeah, we had some discussions. We were talking more trails at that point. But yes, I think there's some opportunities. I think that was a great initial meeting, and I think there's, you know, a lot of direction we can go from there. And they offer a wonderful perspective that's valuable, and I think ties in directly with the rec center and what we're trying to accomplish. So yes.
And I will add that we have previously taken at least one large healthcare group on a tour through the facility. At this time, we just don't physically have space to accommodate what their vision would be, but those conversations have happened.
One thing that I wanted to clarify, I think I read it here in the document, but Pat, you had said that there's only one other low-price facility. So is Saline a low-price facility
Yes.
for what we are offering? Okay.
Yeah, and it was a combination of being what we considered a large facility with a low cost. There's others that are small facilities with a small cost. Planet Fitness, $10 a month, but it doesn't have everything that you've got here, so.
I think that's all that I have from this initial conversation.
Perfect. That was almost exactly 5 minutes, Councilmember Rice. If I may respond to your first question, because I mentioned this to the city manager, I believe, last week, and perhaps some other council colleagues as well. But the city of Saline had great success in this current year, securing a $5 million direct appropriation for rehabilitation of our wastewater treatment plant through the state of Michigan. It would be my recommendation that we ask our state elected officials for more dollars for that particular operation within our municipal portfolio again next year. But if you look at the number and diversity of direct appropriations that were provided via the state of Michigan in this current fiscal year, which actually just started yesterday, there were a number of multi-million-dollar grants given for recreation, parks, enrichment. I don't think that the same amount of dollars will be available in this next fiscal year, but I do think there will be significant opportunity for direct appropriations. And I would add to Mr. Heineck's point, those grants, as I reviewed them, or they're not grants, they're direct appropriations, excuse me, seemed less geared towards underwriting municipal operations and more for expanding amenities that encouraged healthy lifestyles, with the understanding that if you invest those dollars up front, you're likely to save dollars in the long run. So again, that's a staff and council decision, but it would be my recommendation that we go for both a wastewater treatment direct appropriation and one in the Parks and Rec realm in 2024.
We can certainly make a good case for that.
Okay. Councilmember Delorco, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to revisit one of the points Councilmember Rice made about partnering with healthcare organizations. In the initial period of the conception of the Healthcare Task Force, I served on that board, and I remember at the time, one of the options that was discussed for generating revenue would be to partner with such an organization to establish a PT center or physical therapy outreach clinic within the Saline Rec Center. And I think that's an excellent opportunity to generate additional revenue if there's such a desire from both the Saline Rec Center and the healthcare organizations. So of the one that toured the facility, is that something they were interested in, or was that a complete departure from?
No, that's very much in line with what the expectation would be. Just at this point, we haven't had any, I guess, serious interest from a healthcare partner in doing that. You could make the case right now we don't have the space, so is that the cause of the lack of seriousness? Perhaps if we did have that renovated space, it would be more appealing for that particular use.
Yeah, just to speak to the demand for it, if you try to book time for physical therapy, you got to wait quite a while, and you're at their mercy for scheduling. So it's definitely a need in the community. I'm just brainstorming for ways to generate revenue, because we definitely need to get memberships back up. And if we can offer more than what we're currently offering, that's where we need to be focused on at the time being. I don't disagree with any of the data provided in the report. I think you've done your job. I think it's very clear that it's an aging facility that needs investment. And of course, the question for all of us is going to be, how do we accomplish that goal? And that's what's being discussed as well as the study. So I think the data are clear. We need to double down or walk away, because we're not going to get the memberships we need to sustain the rec center without the investment. And with a $7 million price tag to move this rec center into the 21st century, we're going to need that source of revenue to come from outside sources, from public investment, either through said direct appropriations or a citywide millage.
Anything else, Mr. Delrico?
That's it.
Very good. Councilmember Gilboa, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. One of the things with this feasibility study that I didn't necessarily see and would like to have seen is, what would we have done if you had tried to right-size for the facility that we currently have in terms of lesser programming and such to bring down that approach? But I don't believe that's addressed anywhere in here, correct? We basically were looking at additions and expansion of the plant, which build it, they will come kind of approach. I didn't know if we were looking at any other aspect of what would we do if we couldn't do it.
Well, I think from our perspective, looking at it from that perspective, we tried to stay within the footprint as an initial thought, but still showing the capabilities of going beyond with the phases. But I think what they've done with programming was kind of our first nod at that is, you know, you're down to where you don't want to reduce programming because there was a lot of walk-in downtime, particularly in the gym, those types of things. So I think from our perspective, looking at it, is these buildings are built with a life expectancy, and you're there. So eventually, doing nothing is going to give you a building that's going to be unsafe, that you're going to have zero memberships because you can't allow people to go in. You're going to have to condemn it. So we also looked at, you know, what would we do for the biggest bang for the buck, including those, you know, the reductions, the not the Taj Mahal, what at a bare minimum can we do, or do we need to do anything? And I think what we discovered is, particularly the pool area, you're not far from being unsafe or shut down because your pumps don't work.
So that's fine. But one of my things, that helps me understand, but there's certain things that could you have focused on those activities and sacrificed other activities to achieve that from the perspective of the aquatic center, which you're making all those recommendations. Do we need to provide other operations or other activities if we were to just focus on 1, 2, or 3 main things in terms of that?
Yeah, and I think the pool came out heads and tails number one. So in other words, it's not an option to reduce aquatics, is what the members told us. That is what's driving membership right now, that and the fitness. So fitness was second. They wanted bigger space. But we looked at it as pretty much the fitness space was maximized. The only space that we felt was underutilized that could be used differently was the racquetball courts and the child care. And those are in subsequent phases because they don't give you the bang for the buck. Plus, they're pretty much square footage that isn't going to fall down or not operate like the pool is going to. So we did kind of have to look at it from a situational basis. And then I think, you know, from our perspective, yes, it's costly, but to look at it, is this a quality of life issue from a health perspective, from a people moving to town, people staying here? It's like building schools when you know, taxpayers don't have kids in school, but they really want good schools because of the quality of life in the community. So there's a lot of angles to look at it, and we try to look at all those at once.
And then the other second question before I run out of time here is, you know, when we look at the numbers and we talk about residency versus non-residency, and that's a significant support by the city's residents versus the non-residents, and we look at the mixture of memberships, being that a large portion are outside of the community. One of your recommendations was to raise non-residency fees between 25 to 50%. Was that taken into consideration of the impact that could occur in terms of memberships leaving? Because you're talking about adding 700, but if we doubled the fee to the non-residents, there's just some of those mixtures where I'm trying to figure out how you would balance that, because the biggest concern now is that we are subsidizing this operation for outside of the city.
Right.
And I don't know how that's going to be solved.
Well, and it doesn't have to be 25 to 50%. That's just typically what we see. We see right now from what we obviously saw in our 20-minute drive time is your fees are low compared to everybody else. So you've got that is your membership at a level because it's low, or is it because of quality? So you got to raise the quality to raise the fees, but if you implement this plan, that gives you the ability to, in my opinion, you don't 25 to 50% jump fees. You set your fees at a level comparable to the value of your building, and then you discount residents off of that. And that's your difference between resident and non-resident. Nobody feels like they're being punished. Your residents feel like they're being rewarded because they're paying taxes, at least for the capital investment of that. So yes, we see that all the time, particularly in metro areas where people work in a facility, in a city and live in a different one, as even Greg mentioned. There's different ways of looking at it from that perspective. But we didn't feel like you could just carte blanche raise them and leave the facility the same. It has to do with investing and upping the value of the building to where then you can, at that point in time, look at fees in those ranges. So that is meant to be a difference of ranges, not a dollar amount per se.
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to stop it there. Thank you. We're almost to 6 minutes. Appreciate that. Councilmember Dillon or Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I agree that this is a conversation that's going to need to continue. We're barely going to get through the dais with initial questions. So as I read your report, I appreciated all of the data that you provided. And as I tried to analyze it, I wasn't sure that it really hit the mark on some things. Like when we start talking about demographics and such, I mean, you're including Chelsea and Dexter and Ann Arbor and Lincoln in what we are. I mean, I think we were more of a Saline area schools district. Obviously, there's that concept that we can draw from beyond that. But I don't want to be unrealistic in looking at what our potential is for people to come in. I mean, if you look at the school district, which is what we base a lot in our community on, you're talking 41,000 residents versus I'm not sure what number you had, but it was much greater than that. So I want to make sure that we're comparing things. One of the things that I have a great concern about is we've had a lot of talk, a lot of this data focuses on aquatics, especially on zero entry pools, lazy rivers, that sort of splash pad mentality. What you've shown us is building that in a footprint that we already exist. So if you're thinking that you're going to be able to bring all of these people in because there's such a demand for that, where exactly are you going to put those people? We don't have the space indoors for them, and we certainly won't have the water space for them. So then are we going to be in a position where we're regulating members as to who can come in and how they can come in and when they can come in? Because if there is that kind of a demand, how are we going to be able to manage it?
Well, everything that we've done is built on capacity. So 3,200 members is your capacity at what we have designed in here. And basically 30% of memberships don't ever set foot in the building. I mean, and they renew it every year. That's just a national average. Now, that's gone down since COVID. People at COVID decided, maybe we were talking about the trends of where the money went. It went to streaming at home and outdoor recreation. But as a norm, you can regulate that by how you program it. What time are your open hours? And I'm talking about having the parent-taught hours in the morning, having swim lanes that maybe there's only 2 open during the non-peak times and 6 the others. So there's ways to accommodate those. And it's like anything else. If you get to whether you run a pub or whatever, you get to capacity, you do have to, realistically shut things down. I personally think that's a pretty good problem to have, particularly when you're revenue poor. Secondly, when you're right now, one of the issues is the lifeguarding and the number of lifeguards and not having the hours to accommodate. But if all those things are equal, yes, we do look at capacity, and we don't underbuild and over-promise on capacity. That facility will, if the renovations are done and done as we've done, as we've recommended, that 20-mile drive time will support that facility, and quite honestly, 40,000 people will not.
So I guess I'm just a little concerned because right now we're focusing on aquatics. And what you've just said is that we would cap out. So then how are we turning members away? If they have a paid membership, I mean, there are organizations, there are outdoor pools that have a maximum capacity, and then they just stop selling. So how do we do that? Because there will be, you know, I understand that there is a huge draw for a splash pad. That comes up every year when we do visioning. That is something that's always come about. But I don't see how we can physically fit these people into that space.
Well, and again, we looked at the folks that told us that they don't ever set foot in the aquatics, and they are a member, but they come work out. They come to programs, they are a member, but they don't swim. And likewise, there's some that swim and don't do the other. So we did look at those, just like we looked at percentage of resident, non-resident. We looked at percentage of who uses the pool and who doesn't. And again, capacity that I'm talking about is on deck, because not everybody comes. In indoor pools in the summertime, you know, when you have outdoor opportunities, indoor pools aren't that popular. So there are peak months and non-peak months.
Yeah. I don't know.
Go ahead, Director Scruggs, and then I got to move on.
The pool, in order to do what we were talking about in phase one, is an addition of 1,200 square feet in the pool area.
So there, yeah.
Expanding that pool area in order to create that lazy river, zero entry splash pad area.
Okay. I mean, 1,200 square feet is not a huge space, though. But these are things that I want to make sure that we're looking at and understanding, because if we go back to that mentality of if you build it, they will come, well, what happens when they come and we can't accommodate them? Is sort of understanding that piece of it.
Thank you for that. The 5 minutes have eclipsed. So, Mr. Seal, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll try to make it very quick because of the limited time. When I was looking forward to getting this study, I was thinking of it in terms of some sort of a panacea, I guess, for helping to raise the revenue without necessarily raising a whole lot of expense. And my breath was kind of taken away when I'm reading about the expenditure of millions of dollars to make it a better facility, a larger facility, a more encompassing facility. So I guess I'm going to have to subscribe to what I heard the mayor say, and that is, for me, it's going to take a lot more discussion and time to come to terms with the kinds of things that you propose in my own mind, to understand them. I certainly understand where you're coming from. You know, if they build it, they will come. But by the same token, I wonder about a lot of the other things. Can we afford at this time, when we're spending significant funds for the wastewater treatment plant and on our roads and infrastructure, can we also then spend that much more money to support the rec center? So this is going to take time for me to internalize. The one question I do have, though, with a great focus on aquatics, is that I understand that one of the difficulties, at least I thought I was hearing, was that one of the real difficulties we've had is hiring people to work there. And we can build a great facility, but if we can't hire the folks to staff the aquatics facility, how are we going to make it work? And I guess that's my only question right now at this moment that I would put to you both.
Well, and I think that's been a national challenge. I mean, I'm sure you've seen in the news is the lifeguard shortage nationally. So it is something that we did raise our rates for lifeguards. I think there's a need to raise them more, but of course that comes with a cost. You know, and we are seeing the workforce of our younger people decrease since many years ago, so that is another challenge. A lot of our youth are so involved in extracurriculars that they don't always have time. So we do work very diligently. We're working with our PR generalist, Massey, to help get the word out. Also, El Getchman's been working with us to help promote those positions. But yes, I agree, that is key. We need to have those lifeguards in place. But it has been a challenge for sure.
Anything else, Mr. Seal?
No, sir.
Okay, then we're going to transition to our last round of questions from Councilmember Kamir Sulak. Mr. Kamir Sulak, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll try to, obviously have to keep it brief. We've seen a marketable improvement in the programming area, and I'm really happy to see that. That shows the desirability and the benefits that the center has for our community. And 80% that participate in programs aren't members.
So that's 80% of our special event participants. So people who come out to our Halloween Hullabaloo or our Spring Fest event. So that's really just the special event programs, that we were evaluating, just to clarify.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Do you send out like a special email and thank you, and have you thought about becoming a member? I know that's just a small thing that you probably do, but.
Yeah, so we just recently, kind of stumbled upon that information, and so that's part of our plan to boost our membership is exactly what you're talking about. So we're going to be doing that at our big Halloween event. We're going to be following up and promoting those memberships.
Okay, great. I also have a concern about the number of lifeguards and having a sufficient lifeguard workforce. And I look at what they're paid versus what fast food restaurants paid, and I know it's hard to, limited budgets. But have you looked at adding lanes to the pool and the demand for swim clubs that need space? I remember that, the Saline Stingrays of how all the pool time was just so maxed out that they were looking at all kinds of different opportunities. Is that something that has been looked into?
Yes, so actually currently we are working with Jeff Gross with Technique Group, and so he's tied in directly, with Saline Stingrays. And so, yes, we have been offering programming over at the rec center to accommodate that overflow, and there's great opportunity there. So yes, we're jumping on that.
Okay, is there any way to look at the cost benefit of adding more, say a couple more lanes, expanding the pool area? I know that's a big change, but if that really brings in a lot of income, it's just a thought, and I see we're right at 7 o'clock, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you for all that everybody's done on working on this.
Just a quick follow-up on the lifeguard challenge of getting those. We've experienced those as well, and we've taken an aggressive step with our wages, and we're paying them close to $17 an hour now, which we've had to do because we were closing our pool and we were losing members, and now we have over 60 lifeguards, and we've increased our membership fees to offset the costs, and the members have been amenable. We basically told them that we have to charge you this to pay the wages in order to have staff. And for the first time in 20 years, we're not struggling. It's a difficult step to do, but we've had to do it in order to be open.
Okay, thank you for that. Your contributions to this is valuable.
Thank you, Councilmember Kamir Sulak. To wrap this up, to our guests from Barry Dunn, thank you. Appreciate your time this evening and your analysis. Carla, Sunshine, Greg, Paul, we appreciate your attendance. We have a number of good patrons of the Rec Center in our audience this evening, and we appreciate your attendance as well. We will continue these conversations and discussions. I'll work with the City Manager's Office, Parks and Rec, and the Clerk's Office to identify a time, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks, to continue the dialogue. What I would say in the interim is that it's clear that the Rec Center is a valuable community resource. We can do better, and we can certainly make improvements in the ensuing years, but if you believe in the value of the programs and the facility, I hope you'll strongly encourage purchasing a membership. And all of us in the chambers this evening can be ambassadors for the facilities, and the facility, and can talk to our friends and neighbors and family members to also encourage them to get a facility. I think once they start using it, understanding the programs and the special amenities, they'll see it as a quality of life enriching service. So thank you all. At this time, unless there's anything further, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:02.
So moved.
Moved by Gearba, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. We will reconvene into our regular meeting promptly at 7:05. So use the restroom now. I'd like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you'd please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. It is with deep regret that I ask that we begin tonight's meeting with a moment of silence in honor of the recently deceased Cindy Almergashis, who tragically died this past week. She was a longtime City of Saline resident and well-known and well-respected in the broader community. Details of her death involve a pending investigation, a police investigation, multi-jurisdictional police investigation, I might add. So I do not have any additional details to share at this time, but it is likely that we will have some more information to share publicly, likely at our subsequent City Council meeting on October the 16th. So if you'd please join me in a moment of silence for Cindy. Thank you very much, and the city extends its heartfelt condolences to her family, loved ones, and all of her friends and associates. Members present this evening at tonight's City Council meeting are Council Members Kamara Sulak, CO, Del Orco, Gearbaugh, Rice, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and Mayor Morrow. From City staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Community Development Director Harrington, Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Briggs. Am I missing any other staff members? I don't believe I am. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
So moved.
As submitted, Councilmember Rice?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by CO. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we'll proceed to public comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any person may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but of course not required, to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items this evening? The record will reflect there are none from those in the audience. Clerk Royal, did we receive any written communiques in which the individual wanted their remarks read at this time? Easy enough. Then we transition to the first of two presentations. First up is Miss Saline 2023 and Court. And I would like to welcome our Miss Saline and any court members that are present. And then Molly and Kim, would you like to come forward and maybe provide, I think most people are well aware of the Miss Saline pageant, and I should note these two ladies, Kim and Molly, helped to resurrect the scholarship program after was it a 2-year hiatus? 2-year hiatus, which is a wonderful service to the community, and we appreciate that. So I'll turn the floor over to you if you'd like to talk a little bit about the program and this year's winner and second runner-up, or first runner-up and second runner-up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. And Brian's been an esteemed judge of Miss Saline for the last couple of years as well. So thank you, Mayor Marl and council members. It's been our pleasure. Kim and I kind of co-direct the Miss Saline program, and it's under the umbrella of Summerfest. So we're excited to be a big part of Summerfest. And this year was really special. It was the 75th anniversary of Miss Saline. So we actually had a luncheon that we hosted, and we invited back formers. We had the oldest living Miss Saline come, and I think, Brian, you got a chance to meet her, Miss Saline 1958. So it was wonderful to have the breadth of women, and they've done wonderful things. These are entrepreneurs, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're teachers. They've really turned around and given back to the community. So it's been a labor of love to be a part of that. And this year we have some phenomenal young ladies, and we're going to let them introduce themselves. Kim, do you want to say anything?
Sure. Okay. I've just been so excited that the community has just come together to support this and bringing this back. My daughter served as 2018 Miss Saline, and 2019 we didn't have it, and she didn't want to be the last one. So we brought it back, Molly and I together, and with the help of so many community members, amazing judges, and it has been really incredible. And these young ladies have served the community, and they are very visible. They're willing to be at ribbon cuttings, business openings, any kind of fundraisers that we can do. We worked real hard yesterday building our scarecrow, which will be ready in a few days. We're waiting for one more part of it to arrive via Amazon. So once he arrives, we will put him on a stick and you will see it. So please vote for the Miss Saline scarecrow. But I will let Aaron and Phoebe introduce themselves and share a little bit about what they've done so far. Thank you.
Thank you both.
I'm Erin Hudeman. I am Miss Saline. So a little bit about me. I am a senior at Saline High School, so I'm 17 years old. I'm a baton twirler with the marching band and with the Saline Twirlettes. I've been doing that for 11 years now, and I've been in the marching band all 4 years of high school, so I'm now the majorette captain. I am president of the Saline High School Student Council. I was just crowned homecoming royalty on Friday. I am one of the secretaries of NHS. I'm a member of Students Against Destructive Decisions, DECA, and a few other clubs. And in the future, I think I would like to study marketing somewhere, maybe in Michigan, maybe a little bit warmer, we'll see. And I plan to continue twirling in college. I want to thank all of you for all of the support that you've given to the Miss Saline organization. I know how much it's already impacted me and how much it's impacted the other girls who have gone for it and other winners in the past. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Phoebe Huddleston. I am Miss Saline first runner-up. A little bit about me is I'm also a senior in high school, where I am the 2024 business editor for the Saline yearbook. So I am the face of the yearbook for all community members. They always interact with me first. I am also the piccolo section leader for the marching band, where I've been a part of for 4 years. I am also piccolo player for the wind ensemble and flute player for the jazz band. I am also a member of the ethics team and National Honor Society. Outside of school, I love running. I'm currently training for the 2023 Detroit Marathon, which is in less than 2 weeks. And I am hoping in the future to study journalism or something along the line of journalism, because yearbook has taught me that telling stories is one of the most important things that we can do, especially through photos. I'm hoping to study a lot of photojournalism where I can capture moments that would normally be forgotten. And I just want to say thank you for the Saline community for giving so much support to young women and young students alike through the most trying times during high school and middle school. So thank you.
Could we get a picture?
Absolutely, and if I may say one thing first, we're missing one member of the court, correct? Okay.
Yeah. And we're sorry, she actually is at a theater program tonight, but we're missing Katie Boer. And Katie was on the court last year as well. Katie was this year's recipient of the Congeniality Award and of our Spirit of Miss Saline. So real outstanding young lady.
Very good. I did want to acknowledge her because I think she's also been very active in community affairs and being an ambassador for the broader community. I would love to do a picture. My only recommendation is could we have my council colleagues join us, because I think that would be more impactful. So if we could all come down from the dais and get a quick picture, that would be great.
Thank you.
They won't be in the stand in front. Molly, you want to try to get the seal?
I like that.
Okay, and then get the...
Sounds wonderful.
Oh, yeah, that was 230. Why did you have it?
Fabulous.
That looks great.
It looks so official, so great.
Get a little closer here. There we go. Wonderful.
That probably includes everything I've filed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Hold on 1 second. I'll get one.
There's no way that's just my.
And Ben also helps record things at Summerfest. We really appreciate all that. He does too.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, right. Congratulations. Thanks again.
Thank you.
No, just let it go. Accept defeat.
Okay, transitioning on, we come to our second presentation of the evening, which is an update on our recently adopted rental housing inspection program, which will be led by Community Development Director Harrington and Mr. Radzik from Carlisle Wortman. Are you just projecting on the televisions here, or would you like the screen lowered?
I think that the televisions are sufficient. Can everyone in the audience see either the televisions on? Yeah, I think that
Both televisions are on? Okay, all right, very good. Please proceed.
I'm just going to kick it to Mr. Radzik to start.
Easy enough. Mr. Radzik, we welcome you here this evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. And that is one tough act to follow.
It is.
This is an update on the rental housing certification program that City Council opted to move forward with late last year, and which kicked off into high gear, I'd say, in late February, early March of this year, in terms of actual inspections. All of the, or most of the back-end legwork was done by that time. We had registrations beginning to trickle in, and we began scheduling inspections. So with that, I guess it'd be fair to say we're 6-7 months into the meat and potatoes of the program. All right. Just to refresh your memory, because I know we looked at some of this data when you were considering whether or not to go down this path. According to the U.S. Census and the American Community Survey, using 2021 data, there are approximately 946 rented or rental occupied households in the city. That doesn't necessarily equate to rental homes or structures, but the number of actual households, which would include apartment units inside buildings, 2 households in a duplex, and then, of course, 1 in a single-family home. And that, in 2021, accounted for about 24% or a quarter of the households in the city. There are other available sources of data, which we also look at, one of which is through pointtohomes.com, which uses a Yardi matrix data collection. They collect data from available marketing sources, people advertising homes for rent on the internet. And they count 913 occupied rental units or households in the city as of currently. Again, about 24%. As we stand here, I would say today, but it was actually about two to 3 weeks ago when the data was collected. We've registered 510 households, which according, if you measure that against the U.S. Census data and the other available data, is about 55% of what we would expect to find in terms of rental households in the city. So that simply means we've got more work to do to find the ones that haven't voluntarily complied with the ordinance yet. And there may be a variety of reasons why that's occurred. It could be that the owner lives out of town and just hasn't become aware of it. It could be that they're aware of it and they just haven't gotten around to it, or it could be that they've made a purposeful decision to hold off and wait and see if we find them. So we're doing our best to try to do all of that. Of the single-family dwelling units, now again, there's 3 categories that, for our purposes, single-family, duplex, and multifamily. Of the single-family dwelling units, there's currently 73 single-family homes in the city that are registered, 43 of which have been inspected and have been certified as code compliant. The other 30 are pending, either pending their initial inspection or they've been inspected and code violations have been cited, and it's pending reinspection and repair to correct those code violations. Duplexes, 35 duplex homes have been registered, 26 of which have been inspected and certified, 9 of which are in that same pending category. Of the duplex buildings, if you will, just to back up a moment, under single family, you can easily assume 73 single-family households have been registered. That means 73 single-family structures or homes. Duplexes are different. Not every duplex is 2 rented units. Some may be just 1. Some may be not being rented for some other reason or owner occupied. So of the duplex buildings, 20 of them have been registered, 14 buildings have been certified, and 6 are pending. Just for informational purposes, just like single-family homes with duplexes, we inspect the structure itself, meaning the outside, whether it's brick, siding, what have you. We look at the roof, we look at the exterior grounds, and we certify the building and the grounds separately from the interior units. So the building could be certified, and each interior dwelling unit would also be separately certified. Multifamily dwelling units, there are 402 and these are apartment units in commercial apartment buildings that are currently registered. Only 5 are certified. I think the largest complex in the city is 6 Trails on the west edge of town, right at Michigan Avenue, near where Austin Road dead ends. We just recently, within the last couple of weeks, completed our initial inspection of all of the buildings and all of the units, and we issued a lengthy notice of violation to the owner and property management company, and there are repairs to be made in every building and virtually every single household apartment unit there. I will say that the property management company we've been working with has been extraordinarily cooperative and very good to work with in terms of cooperating with our scheduling, paying their invoices on time, and assigning maintenance people to walk the complex and assist with the inspection process with residents.
Mr. Radzik, can I stop you for just a moment?
Yes.
You are indeed correct. 6 Trails would be the largest multifamily development in town. You said, if I'm not mistaken, that essentially every unit in that complex had an issue that needed to be resolved or corrected?
Yeah, I'd have to go back to, if you want to quote me on that, but as I recall reading through it, I don't recall seeing a particular unit that was code certified the first time.
And do you recall at the top of your head approximately how many units?
Oh,
300. 300? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say high 200s. Ben would know better than I do.
Sorry to stop you. That was an important point. I wanted to reemphasize it.
And along those lines, we made several dozen referrals for permits to the building department as part of our inspection process. So when our inspector sees a code violation that is either the result of work being done previous to us showing up that would have required a permit and no permit was pulled, we make a referral, and Mr. Masiak and the building department follow up with the owner on that. Or we see work that needs to be done and would require a building permit, and we make sure that we communicate with the building department to anticipate them pulling those permits. Because we have open communication with your building department so that there's no secrets, there's no surprises. They know what we know and vice versa when it comes to these rental properties. An example of a retroactive permit would be, you can imagine a lot of homes or apartment buildings you go into may have a newer, let's just say, water heater. That's probably the most common one. It's not unusual for large apartment communities to have their maintenance staff install water heaters, and they're not licensed mechanical contractors, and they don't pull permits necessarily. It is a violation of state construction law, but it is not entirely unusual. You'll see that occurring in pretty much every jurisdiction. The agreement that Mr. Masiak made with our inspection staff is that he absolutely wants to go back at least 5 years and further than 5 years if it's a serious, egregious code violation, dangerous type of a problem. So what we'll typically do is the inspector, in preparation for going there that day, he'll actually look through, he'll pull the building records from your BSA software and compile and print out a list of every building and trade permit that's been pulled for that building going back at least 5 years. Then when he walks in, if he sees a water heater that has, let's just say, hypothetically, a manufactured date of 2.5 years ago, because there's a manufactured date tag from the manufacturer on the appliance, and he looks and he sees there's been no permit pulled in the last 5 years, he can reasonably then assume that this water heater was manufactured since then and was installed without permit, and then he'll inquire and find out what the situation is. He'll make the referral, he'll inform the owner that they need to pull those permits retroactively for the purpose of having a certified mechanical inspector come out and look at it. Although our rental inspector working here in Saline is also a certified mechanical inspector for the state of Michigan, he is not being used here for that, but it is a good thing for the city because he'll recognize unsafe installations that an inspector without that background might necessarily see. So I say all that to say that we do make a ton of referrals back to your building department. I will make a note too, and we'll get to a slide here momentarily about legal action that's been required thus far. The number of registered multifamily dwellings should jump here another 2 to 250 in the very near future when the Thorncrest community does register under a court order. And I'll get to the details of that momentarily.
Thank you.
For multifamily buildings themselves, there are 38 buildings that have been registered, only one of which has been certified. I believe it's a building in the city with 4 or 5 apartment units in it, and the other 37 are pending at some stage of the process. Inspection statistics, as of a couple of weeks ago at least, we've scheduled 579 inspections. We've completed 393 of those. Of that 393, 93 were code compliant the first time through, which is a good thing. When we get to the second or third subsequent inspection cycle, 2 to 6 years down the road, I would expect that number of code compliant inspections the first time through to jump significantly higher. 270 units were cited for code violations. 17 were re-inspections where there was no change. In other words, the code violation cited after the time allotted, which is typically 28 to 30 days, there had been no change. And then 13 times our inspector was locked out. And what locked out means in our world is the inspector had an appointment with the property owner or their designated agent. He showed up at the designated place and time, and they did not. And therefore, he was not able to make entry. And when that occurs, they are assessed an additional fee that is equal to the fee that they would have been charged for us dedicating. If it's an initial inspection, we would dedicate 1 hour to accomplish that, and so they get charged, and then it gets rescheduled and we try again. I will say every once in a while, landlords, like the rest of us, experience life. And when we run into situations where something like this occurs and there is an absolute reasonable explanation, we waive the fees with the city's blessing and we reschedule it, and we're understanding about that. We did experience 100 cancellations, so of that 579, 100 times the landlord called within the 72 hours that we provide for notice and canceled on us, in which case it would be rescheduled for a future date. And then there's 86 that are pending initial inspection, so they've been scheduled, but as of a couple of weeks ago, they hadn't yet occurred. As you know, your ordinance provides a financial and performance incentive for landlords who perform well on the initial inspection to earn an additional 12 months on their inspection certification. The standard is 24 months, and you can earn 36 months if you perform rather well. So far, and I'm very, very pleased to see this high rate, so far, on the single-family category, 37% of those that have been certified earned the extra bonus, almost half of the duplex units, and we've only cleared one multifamily building with 5 units in it, and that one also achieved the 36-month. So the cumulative average is 45%, so we're very, very happy. I think as communities go, you're doing very well compared to a lot of other places, and that's very encouraging. Some examples of some of the conditions and code violations that have been cited. These are actual photographs taken during inspections here in the city. We took efforts to mask the locations so as not to single anyone out. These are photos from bathrooms, obviously the mold on the ceiling, mold on the walls, the bathtub. It's hard to see all of it, but obviously the ceramic or the tiles on the wall cracked. It's not watertight. And I think the tub had some huge sections of the finished surface missing, which, aside from looking bad and possibly leaking, is actually a dangerous situation because a child could cut their skin on those conditions. Here are others. On the right is a very dangerous situation. This is a duct. I can't tell from looking at this if this is connected to a carbon monoxide emitting appliance like a furnace or water heater, or if it's just internal air duct system, but it's obviously disconnected. The hole in the ceiling that gives clear access up into the attic or upper level. On the left is an example of an electrical code violation where the disposal under the sink, it's wired to work, but you have open electrical nuts there. It's required to be secured better than that. And the code requires that where the wiring attaches to the unit itself, it's got to have one of those clamps to hold it in place, so that, just imagine you throw something under there and it hits that cord, it could pull those wires apart, or a child playing in there could easily get electrocuted. On the right is a situation where there's a huge gaping hole in the drywall, which in and of itself may not necessarily amount to a serious code violation, but that is a natural gas line coming out of, from behind the wall, connected to an appliance running natural gas. So what occurs in this situation, as our inspector explained to me, and I said, why is this in here? I need to be able to explain this to council. He said, well, if the natural gas connection becomes compromised, it's not just going to fill up that room. It's going to go behind the drywall and fill up everywhere else that it can seep to the other units in the building. Now you have even a more serious life safety situation. The photo on the left, we have found quite a number of these. This is a situation where the sump pump for the structure is connected to your sanitary sewer system. We have cited quite a number of these. So it's adding additional water flow into your sanitary sewer system that should not be there. Sump pumps are supposed to be managing stormwater, collecting around the foundation and getting pumped away to a proper place for stormwater management. It does not go into your sanitary system to help create an overload situation. So as we see these, we are making them corrected, and it does require that they pull a permit. On the right, two different things. This is a dryer connection. First of all, the material being used is not code compliant. You can start a fire with the lint collection and the high heat. It will burn. Unfortunately, places like Lowe's, Home Depot, and other places will sell these marketed, but they're not UL listed for this high heat type of situation. And it's also being pumped into the ground. It's required by code to go outside the building, not inside the building. Legal action. Fortunately, there have only been a couple of instances here in the city. I'm very happy to report. And again, this graphic is up here because these legal actions are completely unnecessary, but unfortunately they do occur. One apartment community, and I think it's fair game, it's the one I mentioned earlier, Thorncrest. We tried our best. I was actively involved. I spent several hours with the on-site property manager early on and again later on, and telephone calls, voice messages, emails, letters, certified letters to the owner's address per your assessor's records, to the resident agent under the state guidelines. They're the ones that are responsible to accept any legal service. No response whatsoever, not even a, hey, I'm not going to comply, or some other excuse, just absolutely none. So we finally, we met with Mr. Harrington and Mr. Ojak, and we cited them. There was a hearing scheduled in 14A4 court. We scheduled it as it happened. The same owner owns a similar complex in the city of Milan, and we had the same exact situation there. The only difference is there they had tenant complaints where we had done tenant inspections with life safety code violations that they had not responded to. Here, we also made contact with several tenants regarding bedbug situations, and had zero response from management or the ownership. So we went to court. They voluntarily consented to sign a consent agreement. So there was no need to actually provide testimony, but it went on the record. The judge signed the order, gave them 2 weeks to register the entire complex, and then they were required to complete all of the initial inspections by a date certain, I think in November or early December. I think it was 90 days out. And as of today, they have not done either. And we are scheduled for a show cause hearing, at which time the judge could find the owner in contempt and fine the owner, or perhaps even under these situations, the owner could be jailed. We never like to see that, but we're not aware of any reasonable explanation for why this has occurred. So they are currently in default, but we're still moving forward. There was one landlord that initially refused to cooperate with inspections. When they submitted their registration form, there were handwritten notes on there that said, my tenant will be exercising his or her right to refuse consent, which tenants have that right under state law. We contacted the tenant. I had a lengthy conversation with the tenant, and once the tenant understood what the purpose of the inspection was, where the inspector would be looking, and more importantly, where they would not be looking within the home, he readily said, yeah, I didn't understand it correctly, and I will 100% cooperate. So that has taken place, and we were able to set the legal action aside. And then finally, there was one landlord that refused to register, said it wasn't being rented, the occupant had left. Meantime, our inspector was concurrently speaking with the tenant about their grievances, and he asked me to go with him because of the conflict. So I went with our inspector, Brandon Boggs, and we did the inspection it was on the second floor of a home in the city, and met with both tenants and their 5-year-old, and there were serious code violations, and then we were ultimately kicked off the property, and that's still in the process of being resolved. Those are the updated data and anecdotal stories to date, and I would be happy to entertain any questions or concerns that council has.
Hang tight, Mr. Radzik, because I'm sure there will be. Mr. Harrington, is there anything else you would like to add at this time?
I think Mr. Radzik covered most of it. It's been a lot of work, I would say, to get through this. We've had a lot of combative landlords. We've had concerns with tenants, as we've discussed. We've had some properties that have been, unfortunately, eye-opening for a variety of reasons, and as discussed and shown. So it's been a balancing act, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And to Mr. Radzik's point, I think, looking at the second or third cycle of this is when we're going to see a lot higher forms of compliance, really making sure these properties get up to a safe and livable standard for all the tenants and all of our residents in this community.
Very thorough presentation.
Thank you.
Let me begin, and then I'll start to my right this time and then to my left with questions or comments from my council colleagues. My approach as both a council member and mayor has generally been to err on the side of less regulation, streamlining our ordinances, reducing our regulatory burden on both residents and business owners. So this approach, when first conceived, was not something that I enthusiastically embraced. Of course, I am on the record, I voted in favor of it. And based on my subsequent conversations with Mr. Harrington and his staff, conversations with you, Mr. Radzik, and your presentation tonight, underscores the validity of that vote. Now, let me say a few things. It's wonderful to hear that most of our landlords and property owners are interested and willing to be compliant, whether they agree with the policy approach or ordinance or not. That's what I would expect. And I can freely admit that I'm sure most of our landlords in town are good, conscientious people who want to do right by their tenants. That being said, the pictures that you provided, some of them were appalling. And I use that word deliberately, and those are clear and unambiguous things that detract and deter from somebody's quality of life. I mean, these are major, glaring health and safety violations. So again, it underscores the need for this. I'm glad that this approach has been implemented, and I applaud you, your colleagues, and our own staff for the progress you've made in essentially 6 months. So I know we've got a lot more work to do, but good job thus far. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kamara-Sulak, questions or comments for either Mr. Harrington or our guest, Mr. Radzik?
Yes. I think we've made some progress, and it's evident from this information that we have a ways to go, but I think we're on the right path. Those pictures, and I will agree with Mayor Morrow's comments, are egregious. They're not small, they're not in a corner somewhere, and you know, if those were homes that were going for financing, they would have a hard time qualifying for Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA. But at any rate, I think I look forward to the future when we see more compliance and more data. Please keep at it, and I feel bad for all those times where you get cancellations. And just for the public's edification, how much is the inspection or reinspection fee if you aren't given the 72-hour notice, or the owner or their agent no-shows, no call?
If it's a no-show or a lockout situation, we charge the same fee for the reason we were there. So in other words, if it was an initial inspection of a duplex unit, Ben, help me out here, is that
75, yeah.
$75? What is what the city would bill them? That we charge less than that, obviously, but so because we've dedicated the inspector's time for the approximate amount of time that we feel that he would need to complete that inspection, to get there, complete the inspection, write the report, and transmit that report to the property owner. It's not just the time spent inside the structure.
Oh, certainly.
There's not an equal amount, but a near equal amount of time spent doing the reporting and transmitting that so that they can get a start on making the repairs. Yeah. Cancellations, if they cancel, in excess of the 72 hours, there's no additional charge. We do monitor cancellations because if we see a pattern, there have been a couple where you see cancellation, it's rescheduled a month out, cancellation. At some point, you have to question what's going on. Are you just kicking the can down the road, or is it legit? So we monitor that and try to make reasonable, value judgments on what's happening. And again, it's helpful when the landlord openly communicates with, their situation.
What's your recourse when they keep?
Well, at some point, if we feel it's unreasonable, we can cite them. If it's occupied, we can cite them for renting and occupying it without a certificate of compliance. And then that gives the judge or magistrate at the district court, which is the lowest level of scrutiny, an opportunity to make a decision. Is it reasonable or not?
I know we don't want to go down that road, and it's a lot of hassle and a lot of time on task that's just wasteful. But about how many times do you think is reasonable? Are we talking 3-4 times? Are we talking 5 times or more? And I know it depends upon the reason for cancellation, but it's probably more often a text or an email cancellation.
Normally. Stacy Kingsbury is our administrative staff person who does all the scheduling and processes the registrations and sends out the letters to people asking, hey, it's not registered, it's not your principal residence. Is this a rental? If it is, please contact us or register. If it's not, also please contact us and let us know what the situation is so that we can change the records and quit bothering you. Because there are a lot of legitimate, situations like that. So it's helpful to have the same person doing all that work. She knows, we've talked, and she knows if she sees it twice in a row and it's been pushed out a couple of months and she doesn't have a good feeling, and then they want to do it again, we'll dig a little deeper and say, well, we'll challenge them, like what's really going on. And we've heard all kinds of stories, and some Some are very legitimate, others not so much. But if it goes 3 to 4 months of cancellation after cancellation, because it's almost always rescheduled a month in advance, because the ordinance requires us to give them a 30 days notice of the inspection date. So in other words, I guess, for lack of a better term, if they're playing the system to their benefit, we'll challenge them at some point. And if, like I said, we almost always can resolve it at some level internally, but if we can't, we'll go in front of the judge or magistrate. We like to be in front of the judge. I don't know how familiar you are. I know Mr. Seal would be, but a civil infraction, whether it's a violation of this ordinance or a speeding ticket, you can challenge it informally, in informal hearing before the magistrate. There's no lawyers allowed in front of the magistrate. The only problem is the magistrate has very limited powers to issue and enforce different types of orders. So what we typically will do, if we're anticipating a problem and we need to accomplish something, we'll write the ticket and we will ask for a formal hearing in front of the judge, which so far has been Judge Frushauer, right up the road here. And that way, the city prosecutor can be with us and represent the city's interests. And if the defendant is a corporation, like an LLC, they're also required to bring an attorney. Now you've upped the ante, right? Because people are spending more money and it usually gets more quicker results that way. And if we do need to get an order, like what happened with this other community, the judge can sign it immediately. We prep in advance with Mr. Ojak to make sure that he comes to court with an order prepared that we've already reviewed and vetted, and get the judge to sign it right then and there. So it's worked out pretty well.
Well, I can tell that you and your staff and city staff is making more than reasonable accommodations and being very patient. So it sounds like a very fair process. That's just going to take some more time. So like I said, I'm glad we're going down this road, because we don't know how long and how many people have been renting unsafe, health and safety for themselves, for their children, and that there's no excuse for that. While it seems small, it's very, very important.
Absolutely.
I'm glad as a city and your company that take it seriously and doing it very professional.
Well, thank you. That's really nice to hear. I will say some other agencies have taken note. We were contacted by Washtenaw County Environmental Health Department because of a tenant that reached out to them about radon. They had done their own radon test in their rented unit, and the test results were above what would be considered safe. And the county reached out to us because they had somehow heard or read that Saline was doing this. I think the call came to the city first, and then it got flipped over. And I met the gal for coffee, and we talked about radon, and I talked with numerous building officials. Radon's one of those tricky things. There are state and federal guidelines for what is safe and what is not, but there are no regulations that can be enforced. So, unless a local jurisdiction had an appetite to establish some enforceable standard, all you can do is do your best to convince the landlord to do the right thing and have it professionally tested for an accurate result, and then if it is potentially dangerous, to do some kind of mitigation, which anymore is not overly burdensome financially. I think it's under $1,000 to have a system put in. But this particular tenant with a child was concerned. And in the end, we had to convey that there's no standard for us to enforce, but we did have that conversation with the landlord.
Okay, that's all you can do.
Yes. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamara-Sulak. Councilmember Seal, any questions for our guest or city staff?
Just a statement, Your Honor. Thank you, Mike, for taking part in this and playing a key role. Initially, I felt much like the mayor. You know, were we being too big brother-ish in trying to institute a program like this? And hearing some of the complaints from some of the landlords, I questioned in my own mind whether it was necessary. However, I did vote in the affirmative to move forward with it. And I'm gratified to see that there was apparently a very great need in the community for inspection of these rental units. I'm also gratified to see landlords like Six Trails coming forward and doing the right thing as a result of this program. So I think the proof's in the pudding. I think that it's paid off, and I'm glad that we've done it, and I'm glad to see that many landlords are doing the right thing. So thank you again, Mike. Thank you, Ben, too, for your role in bringing this forth.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seal. Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, questions or comments for our guest or city staff?
Thank you. I just wanted to also make a statement to start with that I appreciate all of the time and the effort that's put into this. I truly appreciate the respect that you're giving to the owners, to the tenants. I think that was a big concern in the beginning of that we were just going to bulldoze our way in and it was just going to be do it our way or it's the highway for you. And I really appreciate that you're explaining to them what the process is and what it looks like, and we're giving them opportunities to correct things. And I think the general population wants to do the right thing, and we see that happening by these numbers. I want to say a special thank you because what you've done is really improve the quality of life for a lot of residents that really didn't have a voice because they were afraid to speak up. They were afraid that they were going to lose their housing, as terrible as it might be. And so it was never fair to them to be living in substandard housing. And so that's where I'm hoping that this program is going to close that gap. And then the only question that I have is probably for Mr. Harrington, which is, what do you envision for a time frame for the next update, and where do you think we would be in the process? I mean, it seems like this was like sort of the low-hanging fruit aspect. So what do you think will be the next tier to it?
I don't think we necessarily anticipated as much pushback from the multifamily complexes, which one would presume under the guise of an LLC would be more corporate and professional to begin with. So I think that's been a large issue that we've had is actually not the single-family landlords registering, dealing with the individual personalities on that level, but really these LLC corporations that for whatever reason have pushed back or refused to register, obviously the corridor one being the most prominent, but we still have some others outstanding that we need to pin down. They're not quite as big, so they don't have quite the track record of tenant complaints either, so they're not quite as urgent in that sense. But again, as we found with Six Trails, these are properties that have not been investigated or looked at except for the occasional permit that they did choose to pull in the last 30 to 50 years. So I think the next big push is really these larger multifamily complexes that we need to eventually compel to register with the city and be inspected.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Gearbaugh, any questions for staff or our guest, Mr. Radzik?
Just a couple. Again, I repeat everything that's being set up. Appreciation. I mean, Mr. Harrington jumped onto this. You know, for me, this issue has been 5 years in the making ever since we had the problem with Thorncrest, which you're still dealing with significantly. The fact that Mr. Harrington and yourself have been able to dive into this and address it, it is a thing that we need to do. And for me, wondering, do you have sufficient resources and staffing to accomplish, and do you expect what you've seen to continue, or is this more or less than what you had anticipated in terms of violations?
In terms of violations, I would say it's about what we expected. We knew there were going to be pockets of really bad buildings. The single-family homes we expected to be in pretty good condition, and with a couple of exceptions, I think that's been the case. Saline is not off the rails compared to other communities that have started programs the same types of programs in terms of the voluntary compliance rate for landlords that are, not registering or registering. I think it's very manageable. We will easily get through all of the units in 2 years.
Do we have sufficient inspectors and whatever to go in and make sure that those happen, Mr. Harrington?
Right, so the inspection service is actually through CES. So Brandon Boggs is an employee of CES that does the inspections on behalf of the city. In the event that Brandon is unavailable or we have an extenuating circumstance, either Mr. Feldkamp, who is our primary inspector for building, mechanical, plumbing, and not electric, he's not an electric, so building, mechanical, and plumbing, he would also be able to fill in. They're enforcing the International Property Maintenance Code, which is not a state-adopted building code. It is one that we adopted as a city. And we had 2017, right before we adopted this ordinance, we adopted the 2021, which was just that requirement for the carbon monoxide detector. So we have staff that are qualified to step in and assist when needed, but per Mr. Razik's point, on a 2-year cycle, we should be able to hit everybody, hit every property, every unit. So I think we're on track to do that. And like I said, I think the multifamily push is really what our next big boulder to move is.
And when we discover that, like a water heater hasn't been, a permit hasn't been pulled, or something was done by a contractor or a builder, what are we doing in follow-up in terms of that to make sure that that happens in the future?
Yeah, so one of the things you might notice in the coming months, especially on our monthly reports, we just reformatted those, we have an uptick in inspections perhaps, but less fees than usual. And that's really because our building staff are flagging those administratively to say, hey, they need to pull a permit. We know that this water heater exists. We need to follow up on it. They're opening either an enforcement in our permit software or opening the permit essentially for them. And we're following up that way. We're all in communication. All of their inspections, all of our inspections, all of our code enforcement are all on the same screen in our permit software. So we can all see each other's work. We know when they've canceled 3 times in a row on Mike, when they're not following up on us on a permit application, things like that. So we're pretty diligent in that respect.
And so, we know that you have to charge double a permit fee if you haven't pulled a permit or whatever. Are we also reporting to the licensing bureaus their failure to comply?
Well, that would be in the case that a licensed contractor had installed it. If an unlicensed, let's say a mechanical worker or a maintenance worker at an apartment complex did it, or perhaps even some of these property maintenance companies did it that were never licensed to begin with, going to a licensing bureau doesn't really do us any good because they weren't licensed to begin with. So
I just know in the past we've had licensed builders that didn't pull permits, so I wanted to make sure that that was continuing.
Right, and we do flag those to the best of our abilities. Oftentimes it's more work than it's worth to get Laura involved. It often doesn't lead to a speedy resolution or a resolution at all. It's kind of like reporting spam on Twitter or Facebook, X or Facebook, who knows what's going to happen. So we definitely just go with the double permit fee. And if it was a habitual behavior, something that we've dealt with dozens of times, at that point, yes, we're going to Laura because it's not tolerable.
That was helpful. I wanted to make sure the habitual ones. And then lastly, did we have to relocate anybody in those units that were severely compromised?
No, not yet.
Okay. So that example of where all that mildew and everything is, that person is still living in that environment?
Yes, although it needed to be addressed ASAP.
Okay.
Life safety violations are usually 7 days or less turnaround for the repair. The non-life safety ones are 28 days normally. And we use 28 days because it's just easier to say, I'll be back 4 Tuesdays from today rather than 30 days for scheduling purposes. So no, we haven't had one that was, it would be condemned at that point, in which case Mr. Masiak would have to get involved as the building official for the community. He would have to placard it and declare it unsafe for human occupancy, in which case that triggers a whole other legal procedure for relocation.
I'll just add, too, we have, in light of some other blighted structures in the city not related to residences, thankfully, have installed the dangerous buildings process, which is that process that Mr. Razik's alluding to. So we have the mechanism in place. You have to essentially hire your own judge to an extent, or investigator in this particular instance. So we have that process set up if and when we need to use it. So.
Appreciate it. I just am glad that this is happening because I think this makes our housing stock not only better, but it also makes this community accountable for all its families. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Delarico, any questions or comments for our guest or Community Development Director Harrington?
I have no questions, Mayor. I'll just state that I fully embraced the making of this ordinance when it came through on the Code Review Committee as a council liaison, working with Mr. Radzek and the other colleagues on Code Review, and I voted for it on council, and I'm glad to see we have it in place. It's working.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. DeLorico. Councilmember Rice, any questions or comments?
I'd like to start with a comment and just sort of echoing all of my colleagues here. You know, these are nominal fees for landlords. This is, if you're going to be a landlord, this is what you should be doing in the first place. So we did hear some feedback from the community in the beginning where landlords were pushing back. Community members were also, you know, discouraged, saying, you know, they're going to be coming into my space, blah, blah, blah. But the benefits are outweighing the costs of any of this. We can't be an equal and inclusive community if we are ignoring parts of our community who, like my council member, or like Mayor Pro Tem Dillon said, don't have alternative choices. They can't just pick up and move. You know, I see it on Facebook all the time. If it's so bad, just pick up and move. Folks can't just pick up and move. I mean, think about the economy right now. Think about life circumstances. So I fully support this ordinance, and I think that you all are doing a great job. And I encourage our community members to continue to have conversations with city staff as, you know, problems occur. With that, I have a couple of questions for probably Mr. Harrington. Have you had any sort of community outreach specifically to Six Trails, knowing that pretty much every occupant has something going on in their apartment right now?
So Mr. Radzik will provide inspection information to tenants upon request. We have not had any large swath community outreach. There are a variety of reasons for that. It's not something we're necessarily opposed to doing, but it can get somewhat perilous dealing with that and the landlord, especially when the landlord is showing progress. You know, you don't want to poke the bear essentially and get other organizations involved. However, there have been talks that we've had internally about potentially doing a mailer, at least informing tenants of various rights and resources available to them throughout the county. The city of Saline is obviously not big enough to provide relocation services or, you know, robust legal action or legal support, but those types of resources exist within the Washtenaw County area. Perhaps doing a mailer to alert them to the fact that there are legal groups out there that are willing to protect them, to teach them how to escrow their rent if they're living in substandard conditions, which is something that's relatively common and allowed under Michigan law, as well as, you know, ways to report issues to the city in the future so that this is dealt with more proactively.
I think that's a great idea, and I think from my understanding from a couple of community members of this new management, the new management company is more open to these types of conversations, and it sounds like they're working on these issues. But I think it's really important to let that segment of our community know that, like, we didn't just create this ordinance and then we're just gonna, you know, oh, it's done, it's over with. Like, we're here, there's resources, because that was gonna be one of my next thing, you know, are there services and resources? So if we could supply them, you know, maybe giving a heads up to the property manager that just says, hey, as a service of the city, we're just, you know, reaching out to your residents to see if there's anything we can do to help them.
If I may, Councilmember Rice, to your comment, Mr. Harrington, about a letter or communicate to tenants, I'd also highly recommend, I have some in my office, although they're dated because they were provided by former Representative Donald Lazinski, but both the state and Senate provide a booklet called Tenant Landlord Guide, with a pretty heavy focus on the rights of tenants. It's a free publication that's provided in hard copy form and electronic by the state of Michigan. It's an excellent resource. They've been providing it for probably nearly 50 years. I would highly suggest getting that link and maybe getting a box of 200 or so from either Senator Irwin or Representative Brabeck. They would be free in distributing them and maybe having some here in the lobby as well.
Absolutely.
And then also ensuring residents that, you know, having their property manager ensure that they're working with the city to go through these. You know, there's 300 apartments, so you may be the last on the list because yours may not be as highly rated as something else, or we may need a part that we're coming in. Just those kinds of communications, I think, help ease the community in knowing that their issues are being addressed. Second to that is the Thorncrest situation. How many occupants are in Thorncrest?
I don't have a number on the occupants. I could pull up the housing study real quick and tell you the number of units. It's somewhere around 150, I believe, at Thorncrest. There's like 10 buildings, about 15 units per building.
And one building is currently unoccupied?
Yes, one building on their site is currently unoccupied, but...
Is that prior to them acquiring that other parcel to the east? There's another apartment community immediately adjacent to the east, and Thorncrest acquired a half of that and added it on to Thorncrest recently.
Right, so there's we'd have to do the math. I have the numbers, I just have to pull them up for you real quick, so.
I would highly encourage we have some community outreach with that.
And that's something, we've spoken to many of their tenants, at least since I've started this job. I've spoken to many of their tenants, both on-site, in my office, over the phone, and over email. It's something that we're constantly vigilant of. We provide them resources as they contact us. A lot of them, I would say, are genuinely afraid. And it's a hard situation to navigate with them, where they want someone to hear them, but they don't necessarily want someone to act on their situation because they're afraid of retaliation. And I think that the benefit of programs like this one are that's not a fear for these folks, that it's for everybody, it's universal, and that way they don't feel like they're going to be called out by their landlord for raising a complaint. But we met with several tenants who had really bad bed bug infestations at Thorncrest, or at least I didn't personally witness. I did not go inside the unit, but they're in tears on the sidewalk, and it's really difficult to navigate that. So.
You made a really great point in what you just said, that this equals the playing field for everyone. Like, that's really important, I think, as we look at diversity in housing across our city, is that there's an equal playing field for, income status, rental status. Everyone should be living under the same health and wellness, aspects of their lives. So I think that that's a really great point that we can stress to the community, that this is meant to equal things across the board. So we are not here to, we're here to help. So I think that's a really great point that you made. One more question that I had in here. I think we sort of have talked about this, but can you just go over again, how long are we giving this process, this first 2 years of compliance, before we really get into it? Are you giving it another 6 months for people who haven't completed their inspections? We don't want to perpetuate this to 2 years and then the cycle gets messed up.
So it's a 2-year cycle with an opportunity for a third year, which many landlords so far have complied with. I think that percentage getting the third year is going to start dropping, because the early adopters, if you will, or the good ones, the good landlords, that didn't have much trouble passing, right? So we will certify everything within the first 2 years. And we're watching the progress. We know we've already begun to double down to try to locate and communicate with the ones that haven't registered. The ones that are avoiding inspection, we're monitoring that, and we know when to ratchet that up at an appropriate level. So I have no concerns that we will get through this in 2 years, and then the cycle will begin again.
And it's just in nature that the next cycle should be quote unquote better, right?
It absolutely
Cleaned
should
up
be.
a lot of this, and the next cycle will just be these kind of quick, we missed that, not you, but the landlord.
Yes. Yeah, I do want to make a couple of, if I may, just quick comments. You can imagine our inspectors see and hear a lot when they're in someone's home. The first question they ask when they walk in, if the tenant's there, is, what do you want me to know about this place before I start looking around? Is there any particular place you want me to focus on? I think the mayor, somebody brought up those handouts. Our inspector about a week ago actually approached me and said, is there any way we can get our hands on, there's handouts from the Fair Housing Center of Southeast Michigan, which is based in Ann Arbor. I wasn't aware of the one from the state legislature.
Tenant landlord guide, it's excellent.
If there's no objection from council or staff to our inspectors arming themselves with that literature to hand out, we would like to do that. Just a quick anecdotal story, and again, I'm not going to attach a location to it, but a young gal with a 5-year-old in an apartment with a lot of serious problems. And the inspector had an opportunity without the landlord necessarily nearby and said, why did you call anybody? Why didn't you reach out? And they said, well, same story. I would, but I know I'll get it. They'll evict me. And then it got to, they insist I pay cash. They won't even give me a receipt for my rent. They said, if you want a receipt, the rent's going to go up. and then you'll just use it against me in court. And it goes back and forth. Some communities in California, actually, have set it up so that if you file an eviction action in the district court to evict someone, first thing the judge wants to see is your certification from the local community that you are registered and code compliant. And in the absence of that, there is no eviction. I don't know how to make that happen in Michigan, but I'm really interested in looking into how that could potentially take place. So if with your consent, we would like to be able to the inspector start carrying those and handing them out when he feels it's appropriate or when he gets asked. There's also a bill floating around right now in the legislature. There's a gal named Judy Allen. She's the legislative liaison for the Michigan Townships Association. We had a long working relationship when I was in Ypsilanti Township, and she reached out to me recently, a couple of weeks ago, for input. She said, I know you're not there, but I know you're representing different municipalities. Just want your opinion on the mechanics of this bill. And the bill basically says, it passed the House, I think it's in the Senate. I don't know if it's been reported out of committee, but it basically said, anytime the city cites code violations, you're required in writing to notify the occupants, because that's currently not required. So if that passes and gets signed into law, then we would, I don't know if we'd have to amend our ordinance or just amend our internal policies on how the city does that, but the last I heard, it was being amended to only include life safety situations where there's imminent danger. You're then required to notify the occupants in writing, which, in my opinion, is a really good thing to do. Probably should be doing it anyway. But just to give you an idea, that's floating out there. And that would add just another layer of enforcement activity that would be required, but it's not overly burdensome, so I don't think it would be a big issue. So all those things are kind of floating out there.
Anything else, Councilmember Rice? Nope. Very good. Mr. Radzik?
So you're good with us giving that information out to tenants then?
I don't think there's any objection from the dais. Yeah, I would just, between either myself or staff, let's make contact with, do you prefer a hard copy of the document? Okay, it's an actual booklet. It's probably about 50 to 80 pages. But they come in boxes of about 150, but we can request those through either Senator Irwin or Representative Brayback.
That would be great. And I'll reach out to the Fair Housing Center and show you what they have and see if it meets your approval.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time this evening. Mr. Harrington, anything else?
No, I think that should do it. Thank you.
Easy enough. Okay. Then we are transitioning now to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for discussion.
I'd like to remove item 23-207.
Okay, that's a charitable gaming license for the Saline trap shooting team, so that will become the first item under new business. Mr. Gearbout, did you want to make a motion then to approve the consent agenda as amended?
With that removed, yep.
Yep, okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dylan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The consent agenda is approved as amended. We move on to unfinished business, an item we dealt with about a month ago. Agenda item 23-196, DTE Gas Franchise Ordinance Number 859. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and to approve or not to approve the second reading and adoption of a 30-year DTE Gas Franchise Ordinance Number 859.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rice. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to begin?
Certainly. So this is the second reading of this ordinance. There is no change from the first reading to the second ordinance. There were some council comments during that first reading, but ultimately it was the direction of legal counsel that there was not additional recourse for us to include in the agreement under existing state statutes to compel any specific actions within any specific time. However, our contacts at DTE did provide additional information, a communication around how they identify projects, how they prioritize and schedule them to meet their own internal risk mitigation goals, and then identified that certain improvements are scheduled in the Saline area for 2025.
Very good, and we do have representatives here from DTE tonight. We appreciate your patience. Is there anything that you'd like to add for the record at this time?
No, just thank you for your kind consideration.
Okay, hang tight, because there might be some questions best addressed by either one of you. Are there questions for the city manager or for our guests? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just clarification, I know I was reading about, responsibilities for doing damage and repairs like that. So then we do have the ability to say, if they came in and did or tore up one of our streets, we could request them to redo the whole street, correct?
Well, within a reasonable scope, yes. If they did significant damage, they would have to restore it to its pre-damaged state.
Just because I don't want, I mean, if you had a large section dug out and we end up patching it, which I've seen done in the past, if that's not satisfactory, can we have the whole section of that asphalt relayed so we don't end up having the problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be taken on a case-by-case basis.
And then lastly, it was interesting when I was reading about revoking the whole franchise, there's a possibility that this could actually be taken to the voters to...
On the broader ordinance, yes, or the state statute, yes.
Okay, interesting, thank you.
Additional questions, Mr. Del Arco?
Yeah, I appreciate the legal's perspective on not being able to enforce timelines, but I guess the spirit of my inquiry there was more along the lines of adding language that just says the city and the gas company can meet annually to discuss future repairs, not requiring certain timelines. Because in my view, the issue is just a lack of communication. If we're keeping an open dialogue with the other side of DTE and we have an annual meeting to discuss our capital improvement infrastructure upgrades and try to align what our roads resurfacing projects might be, we might be able to find some areas where we can coordinate these things.
It is already a part of our existing process to reach out to all utilities, not just DTE, as we create our capital improvement plan. And I can say, Molly, if you'd like to speak to that a little bit more.
Thank you so much. So we do try every fall to reach out and to find out what is going on in the community in the next 3 to 5 year, plan, as well as I'm made aware of the master plan effort that's underway. In fact, I came, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and came to a public hearing just about, city structure and efforts, and sat through that and listened through that. So I'm very accessible. So is our gas operations folks. And we constantly coordinate. There's usually utility meetings that are held for major jobs as well. So we're a part of all of that. We try really hard to be a good partner when it comes to those. I don't know, Brian, do you want to just mention anything about the utility meetings that we participate in?
Yeah, just a couple quick points. It goes through what's called public improvement or planning, and then that information is relayed down to us at a station level. And if it's found pertinent or important, they will give us that information then to reach out and try to commit to or do any work that is possible at that time, which is what happened with the recent small section of Maine that we put in at Clark and Maple. A little late to the game on that, but we were notified. We got out as quick as we could after the damage occurred. And thank you to City Manager O'Toole for helping me get the restoration completed quickly on that as well. So all one contractor, all that'll be handled very, very smoothly. So I think overall, we do a really good job of working together. And as far as the utility meetings go and the information that we're given, the more information we receive, in the earlier we receive it, the sooner we can act.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Del Arco?
No, that's it.
Any other questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just real quick, when you mentioned, when you do your large projects, how much notification do you generally give a community so that we can work with you to, if there's any concerns or issues?
So I can't directly speak to large projects. I work out of a service center, so we deal on more of the smaller instantaneous damages, things that need to be corrected. But I know our gas renewal program acts really quickly.
I live this. So we usually go out the year before, and we'll sit down and we go through the whole process. We walk through a PowerPoint. We talk about the maps and the locations. And it's at least a year in advance, but you guys have just been notified for 2025. So we did put that in there for the northern part, and I sent the map of where we're going to be at in the northern part. So, so that's like at least 3 years notice. So.
And that outreach is to our DPW director and our city manager?
Absolutely. Perfect. Yep, that's who I direct my correspondence to and include the mayor.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Any subsequent discussion on the motion? Then we have a motion on the floor moved by Seal, seconded by Rice to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you both. Appreciate your patience this evening.
Thank you very much.
Yep, be well. Enjoy your evening. We move on to the new business section of our agenda. First up is 23-207. This will be a motion to approve the charitable gaming license for the Saline trap shooting team.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearboss simply to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
So thank you. I had a brief conversation with the city manager. There were 2 of the charitable gaming license applications in the consent agenda. And the only reason that I chose one over the other is that the trap shooting team, I'm not sure that, let me back up, my apologies. We've received quite a few of these recently, or a couple, but we're not receiving them for every gaming license. And so I'm not sure exactly what we're doing and what our responsibility is by approving this. And the reason I pulled the trap shooting one was that on the gaming license, it says that it's asking that they be recognized as a nonprofit organization. There's nothing on this application that indicates that they're a nonprofit. And so I'm just trying to understand what the level of obligation is for the city to do any kind of inspection as to, are they a nonprofit, are they in good standing, are they even within our community boundaries and such. So I just want to make sure that we clarify this, and if it is something that maybe we need to spread the word so that other organizations are doing this.
Who wants to comment? City Clerk? Go ahead.
Yes, the thing behind these requirements is it can go to any municipality. So if the township was meeting, and it's the Saline school system is who this is through. So if the township, Pittsfield Township was meeting prior to a certain date, they probably would have taken it there. They brought it here because we have 2 meetings a month, so that they're trying to get this done because they're having a raffle at the fairgrounds, I believe next weekend, and they were award-winning trap shooting team last year. So this is through the school. It is a nonprofit, and it does go through the charitable gaming license, which is the state of Michigan. So yes, there is a whole packet that they have to fill out in order to go forward. But in order to send this into the gaming license, they have to be approved by the city, saying that, yes, we know that they are through the Saline school system. And this is, I've read through it and I spoke with the person, so I'm sorry, I didn't know you wanted more information. I would have gotten you more.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's a LARA requirement that a municipality signs off.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be the city of Saline. It could be.
Any jurisdiction within the boundaries of the school district, yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Because I just want to clarify, because I'm not comfortable signing off without knowing the information if there are issues with an organization or such. So I guess going forward, for me, I would prefer to see some sort of, backup documentation, just even the printout from Laura showing, or from the Secretary of State showing like what their status is, because I don't understand even if they are their own nonprofit or if they're going under the school's umbrella, or how this is working, because they're not registered within the city of Saline. So, I mean, I understand that they're sort of venue shopping to get their answer as quick as possible, but I feel like that's putting an onus on us that we're not actually doing the due diligence.
Mr. Seal?
Just speaking from experience, I in the past have applied for one of these gaming licenses on behalf of the Saline Lindenberg Group, and the state itself required us to tell what the purpose of our group was, what we intended to do with the money, and in order to show that we were not for profit. And we said that we used the money to not only help students who are going over to Germany on an exchange program, but also then to feed the German guests when they came here, and they said, and Lara itself said, that's not a not-for-profit. You're spending the money to entertain these folks, and I'm sorry, but it doesn't meet our guidelines. So they denied our license. So Lara itself also does its own kind of proof of these applications.
It seems easy enough, Clerk Rowe, that moving forward, when one of these petitioners approaches us, to just ask that they provide the copy, the packet that they're required to submit to Laura.
If you understand, though, it's like 60 to 70 pages. I mean, it's a lot of paper that we would be recreating to go to 6 council people, and there's probably only a few pages that you really need. I would be glad to do it.
Is there like a cover page to that document?
No, not really.
That they provide to Laura?
It's this qualifying information was the cover page.
I guess is all we're trying to establish that they're a viable nonprofit or backed by a nonprofit, because then
I assume
we could just ask them to print out the Secretary of State page.
Right. Easy enough. Okay, problem solved. Any additional questions before we vote, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just one question, and I think this is more, I look at this as being it's a Saline residents requested it, but now when I'm finding out that they're going to have the event at the fairgrounds, which is Lodi Township, is there a jurisdiction issue on this at all? Can we just have a clarification and verify for us?
No, our understanding is they're selling within the school district, so any community within the school district could be the acknowledging body.
The city, Pittsfield, Lodi, York, or Saline.
So if somebody from Lodi was a nonprofit and came into the city, and it wasn't associated with,
Well,
so
no,
everything's tied to the school
if
district.
it's tied to the school district, in this case, it's the schools. So if the event's being hosted here, or if it's a nonprofit that is based out of the city, we would see it. If it's the school district, it could be us, it could be another jurisdiction.
Got it now. Thank you.
There's no additional comment or discussion. There's a motion simply to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve or not to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Dillon again to approve. Hearing no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The license is approved. Moving on to new business. Agenda item 23-210. 210, non-discrimination ordinance. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and to adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 860.
I'll move to acknowledge because I think there might be a correction.
Okay, moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. I'll get you on the next one, Mr. CO. Ms. O'Toole, City Manager O'Toole, would you like to begin? And of course, we can acknowledge the other members of the working group who helped to advance this modified non-discrimination ordinance.
Absolutely. So the City Council had provided direction previously to assemble a working group to review the city's non-discrimination ordinance. We hosted several meetings and in that process identified certain improvements to the existing ordinance, specifically to expand some of the protected groups that are covered underneath that, or to further extrapolate on the meaning behind certain groups, as well as to define what is now a Human Rights Commission, rather than investigations occurring solely in the hands of one person, which was previously the Office of the City Manager. They would now be performed by a Human Rights Commission if this amendment is adopted. I believe, most of the changes that are identified here are, broadly speaking, kind of just in keeping with the times, new definitions or better definitions for understanding different statuses and protected classes. And then obviously with the Human Rights Commissions, we have identified that there are precedents for this. This was reviewed by legal counsel and found to be quite sound.
Very good. And let me acknowledge the other members of the working group, which was chaired by yourself, the city manager, Colleen O'Toole, Mr. Gearbaugh served as the council liaison, Jacob Sutton, also from city staff, who's the city assessor, Kristen Woodside, the chair of our DEI committee, and Kristen, you might want to refresh my memory. Was it Candace or Grace who attended? No, neither? Just the four of you. Okay, very good. Ms. Woodside, is there anything else or anything you'd like to add regarding this issue at this time?
I don't think so. I just want to point out that the city...
You want to come to the microphone just so we can get you on the record? Sorry about that.
It's okay. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that the city of Chelsea did help us a lot with us. We modeled a lot of this off of the work that they did, and we went to several meetings and worked with their Human Rights Commission. So I want to give them props for helping us out.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Gearbaugh, anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm just glad that we're able to update this to bring in the correct language that now reflecting that the state has recognized what we were advancing forward. And I think there's a pronoun issue.
Yes, thank you. There's one correction to the amendment, section 46-1A instead of his or her, it should read their. Other than that, I believe this is good to approve then as amended with that language.
That modification will be made without objection.
And I appreciate Ms. Dillon for catching that. Thank you.
Let me just say that, and I've made this comment in reference to other ordinances and policies in the past, but I think this approach is indicative of a best standard. And when we have ordinances and regulations, we shouldn't view them as antiquated dictums that just sit on a desk and collect dust and are never reviewed or modified or improved. I think we had a very good non-discrimination ordinance that was adopted, I think, 4 or 5 years ago now. I'm proud of the work that the city and the work group did on that initiative. But of course, times change and issues evolved, and there were some modifications and improvements that could be made to make this policy better. So I will be supporting the subsequent motion and the following motion to establish a Human Rights Commission, or to approve their bylaws, rather. And I thank the working group for their efforts on this. Again, specifically the city manager, Councilmember Gearbaugh, Christian Woodside, and City Assessor Jacob Sutton. Are there questions for either the city manager or for any of the members of the working group? Mr. Seal.
I have one comment, one suggestion for an addition on, and I apologize for not getting back sooner on this. I'm trying to find where it is. It's the definition of gender identity. The sentence reads, gender identity and individual. Shouldn't we add the word means in there? Okay. And then I had two questions.
State that change one more time for the record, Mr. Seal.
Under the definition of the term gender identity, it should be followed by the word means.
Yep. I don't think that's not a substantive change, just a grammatical correction. So I'm assuming there'd be no objection to that change.
And then two questions for my personal edification. It talks about sex-segregated facilities and/or identities include but are not limited to, and it enumerates a number of things, and then it says athletic events and athletic teams. Isn't there some court challenge right now about that? Do you know?
I'm not familiar, no.
I thought there was a case where, I think it was a female who had an overabundance of testosterone in her system. It was a naturally occurring thing, but somebody had challenged that, saying that she had an unfair advantage over other females competing in the same event. And I thought there was some kind of a challenge in court on that kind of a restriction. I'm not sure.
Legal did review this document, but if
Correct.
you want to make mention of that specific, I guess, potential litigation.
I believe there are some cases out there, but they've not reached either the federal level or gone further on to appeals courts at the Supreme Court, but not the one that particularly you're mentioning, but
Yeah,
there's challenges in a lot of courts right now.
anything that has thus far been precedent setting, I can say our attorney did take into consideration when reviewing.
Okay. Then the other one is just a question for my own edification. I'm not familiar with the term pansexuality. What does that mean?
Do you want to handle that one?
I'll look up the exact definition so I don't get it wrong on record. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
While she looks it up and approaches the podium, Mr. Seal, did you have any additional questions or
No,
comments?
sir, that's
Okay.
it.
As soon as our DEI chair reaches the podium, we will have her answer your question.
So the definition, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is it's a sexual, romantic, or emotional attraction towards people of all genders, or regardless of their sex or gender identity. They might refer to themselves as gender blind, asserting that gender and sex are not determining factors in their romantic or sexual attractions to others.
So that's different than bisexuality?
Bisexual is two, according to the definition, so it's finding two genders that you are interested romantically or sexually.
Okay.
So typically, bisexuals historically has been someone who, like, if I would consider myself bisexual, I'd be attracted to male or female.
Right.
But that term's changed a lot as gender is fluid, and we're learning that, and we're learning new definitions. These definitions are changing as well. So pansexual really just opens up that definition to anyone. It doesn't limit you to only certain people.
Okay.
Or a specific identity such as being gay or
Straight or trans, yeah.
transgender or bisexual or any of that.
Sexuality and gender.
So it's more inclusive than bisexuality.
It's broader than bisexuality,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
For those of people who identify that way.
Correct.
All right. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Kristen. Yes, well, I think Mr. Seo has finished his line of questioning. Yep.
Just one comment. The electronic version of this, for some reason, is a hot mess. I had a really hard time following the red line. But I did notice that the electronic version of the next one we're going to talk about was in like a Word doc version, and it came out beautifully. So just as a note, I've been doing all the electronic testing.
But you're on iLegislate, right?
I downloaded it from Grants, yes.
Or
Yeah.
did you do it from Minutes on Demand? Minutes on Demand.
No, I downloaded it from iLegislate as a PDF, and it came mumble jumbled.
Okay, that's good enough.
Yeah, thanks.
But Minute
I've
on
been testing
Demands
it out.
has a number of errors in it too. In fact, that one where Mr. Seal had mentioned putting means in there, it splits in there, and there's a number of symbols and backslash and things. So just FYI, in the event that there is a translation thing that's happening.
If anybody wants a clean printed copy, I think the clerk would be happy to provide one subsequent to the meeting.
Yeah, just something to note, because I don't know if anyone in the
Yep.
community downloaded it.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments, Councilmember Rice? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just, I mean, we are going to talk about the human rights next one, but the reason why we're moving forward with this idea is to take the point of contact away from the city manager, which made it a little bit, kind of one-sided. So then we decided that going with a group, similar to what we do with our ethics things, would allow for more review by individuals and not necessarily fall into the responsibility of the city manager, which, could become a controversial issue. So just to let you know, that's why we changed that in the NDO.
I should just stand up there. Can I say something else about that
Yep.
comment that you're
Yeah,
making?
please.
The other thing, it's a point of accessibility and being open to everyone. When you find out that you have to report something that's happened to you to the city manager, it sounds kind of scary, right? You don't know who that person is. It makes you feel like you have to walk into this office, and it's more intimidating, and people aren't as comfortable. Knowing that there's a group that you can come to as well is really important, and knowing that there's people from the DEI who volunteer, who do this, who are in this world, who are safe people to speak to, I think also makes it easier for people to report issues that have happened to them.
Yep, agreed. Any additional questions?
I have one.
Yep, please, before we vote.
So in this vote, are we voting to establish the Human Rights Commission?
That's the next.
No, the motion that's on the floor is simply to acknowledge receipt of the city manager's memo, then the motion to adopt ordinance number 860, and then we move on to 2311, which is to acknowledge receipt and to adopt the bylaws for the Human Rights Commission.
So adopting the bylaws thus establishes the commission.
Technically, the ordinance establishes the
Yes.
commission.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a change within the NDO as a process, and that's why I want to make sure that the next one is just a new subsection.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor simply to acknowledge receipt. If there's no additional discussion, all those in favor of acknowledging receipt of the memo from the city manager, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 860?
Motion to adopt.
Moved by Gearbaugh to adopt, seconded by Rice. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Easy enough. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The ordinance is approved. We move on to agenda item 23-211, Human Rights Commission bylaws. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and to adopt or not to adopt the Human Rights Commission bylaws.
Move to acknowledge.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, simply to acknowledge. Is there a second? Was that Mayor Sulak? Yes. Thank you, sir. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to begin?
Certainly. So now with the creation of the Human Rights Commission, we are presenting bylaws. The bylaws for this were mirrored after the bylaws that we used for the Ethics Committee, particularly as it relates to the process for hearing complaints directly. So that puts that hearing process starting with the clerk's office and then sending it out to the committee to then host. It provides a bit more structure than existed in the past with how these complaints can be heard and then ultimately making recommendations to council on action. This is not a governmental body, so it doesn't have its own authority. It is still just a recommending body.
Very good. And Mr. Gearbaugh, Ms. Woodside, this was also an issue that was discussed at the non-discrimination ordinance working group. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I just felt that this was a better approach to do it, and Ms. Woodside had said, basically a way to actually be able to contact and then hold confidentiality and use individuals of that ethics committee should we need to provide more security for the individual or something like that.
Very good. You were very articulate just a moment ago, but anything else you'd like to add about the bylaws for the Human Rights Commission?
No, nothing about the bylaws.
Okay, hang tight in case there are any questions. We'll open it up for questions either for City Manager O'Toole or any member of the working group. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. So the only question that I had was the establishment of the members. Are we going to establish them in this time and space now, or do you establish them when there's an issue that comes about? Because it's sort of like a lady in waiting, like if you establish them now and like trying to determine, are they going to actually, because we talk about unexcused absences within a calendar year. Well, you may not meet in a calendar year, and so I guess I'm just trying to understand about having people sort of committed to something that may not be there. I mean, it would be a hard commitment if you didn't know that it's not like it's a committee that's going to meet every third Thursday or something like that. Like, you don't know what could happen to you in 6 months.
Well, yeah, I think the nice thing with how we structure the membership of this is it's an appointee. So it's a staff appointee, it's a council appointee, it's a DEI appointee. So provided that all those groups continue to exist, it would be relatively easy to identify an appointee at any given time. But to your point, there are no standing meeting requirements. So really, it could be the direction of council that the appointments are just made if and when, the complaint arises. The only trouble then you have with that is there may be a delay to assembling the group, whereas if you pre-identify who those appointees are going to be, they have an opportunity to, be at the ready.
Yeah, my recommendation is if the bylaws pass, that each of the three entities work expeditiously to identify and to appoint a designee. Because I think if there were a serious issue that came up, you want to move on it quickly and be thoughtful and thorough and professional about it. And you don't want to waste time having to assemble people or get commitments from individuals to serve in that capacity. So my recommendation would be, again, if these pass, let's try and identify the appropriate people to serve in this capacity. Go ahead.
I think, yes, as soon as possible, but there's also a structure for how long it takes to respond to someone that has this. So it's not like if we haven't met, if I'm a committee member and I haven't met in 6 months and there happens to be someone that's accusing someone of something, there's still how many days we have to review it and respond to it. So there's still a requirement, if you're part of that committee, you're committing to responding to an allegation within this many days, between this time frame, especially because there's also laws about reporting it too, right? If it is an issue, then there's laws about how long you can wait before, or after a certain amount of time, you can't report the issue. Also, the Human Rights Campaign in Chelsea, they do meet besides when there's an issue that comes up, just to sort of talk and go over things. That would be a good time to discuss, hey, there is this law that was passed federally where we can update the NDO, or this, this change happened. And so that's another thing that they discuss, even when there isn't an issue coming to them.
Good. Mr. Gearbox?
I was just going to say, we could do this like the special projects where every year we identify individuals to serve in that capacity at the very beginning of the year, and you could identify 2 representatives plus an alternate if we needed that from their perspective.
Mr. Seal?
The Zoning Board of Appeals is a similar sort of a committee where they only meet when there is an actual appeal from the zoning laws. And I think they meet every year in January for the first time to appoint the officers. And I think there's a requirement in this ordinance as well, that the officers be appointed at a meeting. So it might be designated that they have a meeting in January at the very least, and they appoint the officers even if they don't ever meet in answer to a complaint.
Agreed.
Yeah, so like the HDC appoints special projects person at the very first meeting in January. So like DEI could appoint at their very first meeting.
We generally do our citizen appointments at our first meeting in January. We try to do as many of them as possible. Obviously, there are vacancies that are created throughout the year. And actually, staff, the city manager's office appoints all of the staff liaisons to the various boards and commissions at the first meeting of the year as well.
And so just for clarification then, so if there is something that comes about and you have an established group, but they're not available, we're not adding alternates, so how does that work?
We would need that, whatever body was missing their member would need to reappoint. It would be treated the same as someone vacating their position, or.
Okay, so understanding that, so is it a temporary fill-in, or would the first person then relinquish their seat and not,
If they're not available to serve, they would be removed and a new person appointed.
I just want to clarify, because I'm going back to the unexcused absence thing. Because you need it when you need it. And so if you have if you have someone that's not available to work through an issue that's been brought before that committee, so are you just bringing in somebody on a temporary basis, like an alternate from that group, or are you replacing that person?
In the case of unexcused absences, if you had an appointee and they had their first meeting, no-show, they had a meeting to hear a complaint, no-show, they had a meeting that was supposed to be a hearing, no-show, absolutely they should be off. You'd hope before that point they'd have the decency to say, I'm not available, and allow for another appointment.
Right.
But ideally, a new person should just be appointed immediately.
I think that each of the entities that appoint need to make a strong emphasis when they recruit individuals that this serving in this capacity is a little bit different. It's not like serving on HDC or parks where you have a routine meeting once a month, that there needs to be some flexibility, and you need to be, passionate about this work. And in the event that there's a complaint, you need to move quickly to organize the appropriate meeting and give the individual or individuals the time and space to articulate their concerns and then follow up on them. Ms. Rice?
There's a quorum is only 3 people, so, it's probably a rare chance that more than 2 people are missing. And then there's also 14 calendar days to consider the action. So I think there's some fail-safes built in here. And I think, like the city manager said, the structure is such that these are appointees who are members of city staff, members of city council, and members of the DEI committee. So these are committed people. We're not recruiting members of the community, that's where it gets harder for us to keep people involved. We're already going to be involved in this thing. So I feel pretty comfortable with the commitment level should things occur.
Very good. We do have a motion on the floor simply to acknowledge receipt of the memo. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to adopt or not to adopt the bylaws for the Human Rights Commission?
Move to adopt.
Oh, boy. I'm going to go with Kamara Sulek as the mover, and I think I heard Del Orco as the second. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? No? Okay. Please.
I just want to make a statement that I appreciate the DEI committee and especially the chair of the DEI committee, Ms. Woodside, in pushing these things forward in front of council. There's a lot going on in this world, and I think keeping us up to date, keeping us on our toes, and making sure that we are doing the right thing and moving things forward is super, super important. So I commend you, and I thank you so much for your effort and your energy.
Very good. Nicely stated. Any additional comments or discussion on the motion? Mr. Kamara Sulek?
I'll just second Nicole's comments. Simply put, thank you.
Very good. We thank everybody who is part of this process. We appreciate your leadership and your commitment. Again, good product. I think it will be, it's a positive, beneficial change to the city of Saline. So we have a motion on the floor moved by Kamara Sulak, seconded by Del Orco to adopt the bylaws. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 23-112, and the city manager at this time is just requesting a motion to acknowledge receipt based on the feedback that she's received today and earlier this week.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearboss simply to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulak. City Manager O'Toole, you want to make a brief comment?
Certainly. I think this is a first draft that we saw of the bylaws presented. We did identify some opportunities to align these better with our existing templates. There are also still a couple outstanding questions that would need to be deferred back to legal in terms of the structure of certain processes. And if anyone else who hasn't approached me yet has comments or questions, please let us know. But I talked to Treasurer Cole, and her goal would be to help with this and present at our next meeting.
Okay. Have council members who had questions, concerns, or suggestions, have they provided those to you in writing?
No, just verbally so far, so anything that I can get in writing would be great.
Okay. And again, the goal would be to have a clean draft for review and approval at our next meeting, which is on the 16th?
Yes, which means I need comments before the end of this week to then incorporate for our agenda packets next week.
Very good. Okay, so barring any comments, suggestions, changes you've already articulated or made to the city manager, were there any other outstanding issues that have come to light in the last day or so that you have not expressed to Ms. O'Toole? Mr. Gearba?
The only thing I'd recommend, can this be referred to the Committee on Committees? Because they should be putting input on this. If we're being consistent with the bylaws and everything. I don't know how you guys have been working on that. Are you all?
We really, the Committee on Committees hasn't been, we had to come up with a better name for that. It hasn't been like reviewing standard bylaws. We've just been focused on that joint training exercise, starting to get everyone on the same page with process, finances, things of that nature. I think if council wanted the direction to be to expand the scope, that'd be fine. But I can say, I mean, just personally at a staff level, that's really what we've been trying to do. This one just kind of slipped through the cracks. Normally there would have been a bit more review before it.
So have we done a more formal review of all our bylaws to make sure that there's consistency?
Yeah, so all of our staff liaisons have been asked to look at their bylaws. And I know over the last year or so, we've had a couple small tweaks, especially as it relates to like the question of absences, to make sure that all of our committees now have similar language to that effect. So.
All right, well, please provide feedback to city manager by the end of this week. If there's nothing further, we'll call for a vote on the motion to acknowledge. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. Last two action items are water treatment related. The first item is 23-213, emergency repair to well number 3 pump. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Superintendent Briggs and to approve or not to approve the emergency repair to well number 3 in the amount of $34,993.76.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Del Orco. Mr. Briggs.
Yes, thank you. I'd first like to apologize that this is kind of a matter of after the fact, because when the well went down, it was imperative that we got it up soon, running as soon as possible. So
absolutely.
This is just the actual cost of having that done, and I'd appreciate your approval.
Easy enough, and pretty timely and important thing to be done. Mr. CO, do you have a comment or question?
I have a question. Mr. Briggs, is this resolution and the next one, are they two separate, completely separate
They are completely
pumps?
different, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that.
They are, yes.
Any additional questions for Mr. Briggs? Any comments on the motion? Okay, easy enough. And then we have a motion properly moved by CO, seconded by Del Orco to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to our last new business item, which is 23-114, high service pump number 3 repair. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from wastewater treatment superintendent Briggs and to approve or not to approve the repair for high service pump number 3 by Kennedy Pump at a cost of $33,495.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge and approve, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. Again, pretty straightforward, Mr. Briggs, but if you'd like to make a comment for the record, we'd appreciate that.
So we have 3 high service pumps at the water treatment plant. Currently, we have one that is new, brand new, we just put in with the upgrade. Number 3, as we were going along, it actually quit. We had to work on that one. I had planned on working on number 2 because it's making some racket as it runs. So just so that you're aware, once 3 is back in service, we'll probably pull number 2 and have it done also. So I'll be coming back with a very similar cost, most likely.
Okay. Do you anticipate coming back at one of our upcoming meetings?
Yeah, again, I have to get this one installed, which may take another 2 months possibly.
Sure. Okay. But before the end of the year?
I hope so, yes.
Okay. Questions for Superintendent Briggs? Councilmember Rice?
I apologize for not understanding all the little details of the wastewater treatment plant. Were these pumps at all going to plan to be replaced in the upcoming rehabilitation, or is this a new problem?
Okay, so number 1, you're confusing wastewater and water. These are at the water. These are at the water plant.
Okay.
Okay.
Ignore that question.
Okay.
It's all right. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, I believe you had a question?
I did, just very quickly. So just trying to understand, were these budgeted?
No, they were not.
Neither. This one, the repair for, is not budgeted either?
The repair to the well was not budgeted, and the repair to pump number 3 was not budgeted. Again, the repair to number 2 that we're going to do, I don't believe that's actually in the budget either, because it kind of developed as we're doing this project at the plant that's been going on for a year.
So do you feel as though there's something that we're going to cut from the budget? Do we have a little extra somewhere that's picking up the slack of these things that were not in our budget?
We actually have some funds at the water plant that are, I can't remember the exact description.
The reserve replacement funds, yeah.
Reserve replacement funds.
Specifically because these are related to existing equipment that needs to be either repaired or replaced, it's appropriate to use those dollars.
Fantastic. That's what I want to know. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions? Comments on the motion? There we have a motion on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Bill, thanks very much. Have a great evening. We move on to the discussion portion of the agenda. I'll start to my left and then to my right. Councilmember Rice, any reports, announcements, or statements?
None at this time, thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Del Orco.
Environmental Commission had a very productive joint meeting with the Parks Commission where we all got together and reviewed and discussed the feasibility study for dam removal. There's a lot of questions and concerns about what that means and what it is, and it's important to articulate that we're just looking at what the data show in terms of is that even feasible at this point. So there was an excellent education opportunity for both groups to get together and hear that seminar. And then secondly, I was able to take advantage of an opportunity last week to attend the MRF in Ann Arbor Recycle. That was a eye-opening experience, very worthwhile of the time going. It's a well-oiled machine down there, a very professional organization, and I was actually excited to be there. So,
very good.
Yeah.
Very good. I heard excellent things about the joint environmental parks meeting, and I would just encourage my colleagues and staff that there are issues that come up from time to time in which it's good to get multiple public bodies to engage and interact with one another. I can remember back in 2006 when I first started to get involved in the city of Saline and I was on the Historic District Commission. We had multiple joint meetings with the Planning Commission to consider the proposed Concannon development at 147 Michigan Ave. And while that development did not bear fruit, it was good to have those groups interact on a substantive policy matter in which both could contribute.
Absolutely. The cross communication was fantastic.
Good, good. Thank you for that. Mr. Gearboss, reports or other announcements?
Just want to thank the community for attending harvest time out at the farm. We had well over 200 visitors, ran out of pumpkins, a number of communities, fiddlers are involved. I especially want to thank a couple of our members, Miley Weberline, who actually works for the city, and Eric Grossman and Scott Renschler, who helped coordinate a lot of the activities, and Nancy Kohler for bringing the pumpkins and cider, which was exciting. A couple things. Risk management met last week. We met with basically Mr. Briggs and Mr. Searles to discuss concerns and get up to date on some of the risk concerns and issues. And fortunately, we were able to address some of them and kind of change the ranking on a couple of them. But there are some other items that have come up that I'll be meeting with City Manager O'Toole to discuss further in terms of things that we need to address in the future. Couple of things that I want to mention, and this is the issue with this recent tragedy that occurred this last weekend. I was quoted by Mr. Langmore in the Saline Post regarding my request to actually look at hopefully relaunching the Domestic Violence Task Force, and I know that our Chief of Police has recommended that we do a little more investigating, and she's reaching out to some individuals that I just feel very strongly, again, that this community, with the recent tragedies that we've had, that this was something that we brought up, but not because of this type of tragedy, but for the realization of 20 years ago, it was an issue there. It's even an issue now, and I think it's just progressively gotten worse. And for us to be a very proactive community, we need to address these concerns and be able to educate individuals. We've been fortunate, but this is unfortunate for this type of thing, but it just raises the point of concern that domestic violence is just out of control, and the types of violence that are associated with it. So And then lastly, one of the things, and I'm going to ask, and I would request, I'd like an update on the fire department and its risk assessment report, and however that can be achieved, I would appreciate that from either our representatives of the fire board or the mayor himself. Thank you.
Very good. I don't have any except the city clerk and I chatted earlier today, and I know she sent out another communique about our committee training, which is next week. And I would just like to reiterate the importance of having council members there and also all of our committee chairs and those who aspire to be in a leadership position on any of our boards and commissions. Again, that will be in council chambers. I don't believe it's listed on the upcoming meetings on our agenda here. Okay, yeah, so it'll be next Monday at 6 p.m. Thank you very much, here in council chambers. And I hope to see everybody there. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. So yes, that was what I was going to be leading off with, the committee for committees. We'll be hosting the joint committee training session, and it is on Monday, October 9th here, as the mayor mentioned, 6 p.m. We are requesting that if you are currently a chair of a committee, that you please adjust your schedule to attend if at all possible. All other committee members are always welcome. The public is welcome. We will be videotaping the meeting and then taking that presentation back to each individual committee so that the rest of committees that are unable to attend will get the information. There is a lot of very important information that will be given at that meeting. As far as other meetings, there is a fire board meeting this Wednesday, October 4th at 6 p.m. over at the firehouse. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, as Mr. Seal mentioned earlier, only meets when we have appeals. It does look like we may be meeting in November. If that is confirmed, I will make sure to announce it. Two things outside of meeting announcements is one, Mr. Delorco touched on it a little bit, is the dam issue. I know we are in the midst of a feasibility study. There's been a little bit of other chatter about the dam that came up at the public town hall. There's some emails that are floating around. There was the joint meeting. There's a lot of concern from residents on the west side of town about the dam removal, because what's being said is, with the removal of the dam and the feasibility study, it's sort of one big long sentence. And so I want to ensure that we are looking through this feasibility study at the feasibility of keeping the dam and what that is going to look like. I would like that to come back to this body with that information, not just what it is going to look like to remove the dam.
We talked about this last week. Do you want to make a comment on that? And then also talk about, because there's going to be a gap here between when we get our next batch of information and are able to have a public discussion.
Yes, so for council's edification, for the public's, the legwork to understanding what it would take to retain the dam has really already largely been completed with our prior studies. If you remember, we authorized actual underwater investigation of the dam. Preliminary dollars were kind of put together of what it would take to do the minimum maintenance. What we now need to look at is what is the alternative? And that's what the dam feasibility study is looking at, is the feasibility of retaining the dam, of not retaining the dam. What happens to the waterway? What happens to the environment? What happens to wildlife? How does it impact the ecology? Can it even be feasibly done? Because we don't know what the sediment at the bottom of Mill Pond contains. So understandably, that is all looking at questions for how it could be removed, but any of those questions' answers could easily point us in the direction of the alternative, which is why I think it's very important to continue to stress a decision has not been made. We don't have the complete information. We will not have that information for another year, roughly. And this is a process that is going to involve extensive due diligence, extensive research, specialized research. And until we have those outputs, I think it's very premature to say that the dam is either being removed or retained.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you very much for that. One of the other things that is a key component in that is the new dam regulations that are still pending. Both Mr. Gearbaugh Ms. Rice and I will be going to an MML conference in 2 weeks, and while we are there, I intend to talk to our MML lobbyists who really have the pulse on what is happening on issues pertaining to dams and several others, and see where they're at with that, because that should help us to gauge to what's going to happen, because if we're going to get some new guidelines and requirements, my hope is that the state is going to provide some funding to go with that. And with that, I think I'm done with those reports. I do have a statement that I'd like to read. Mayor, would you like me to read this now? Okay, thank you very much. And I apologize, this was not read at the top of the meeting. So this is a statement on my behalf. Our community is again grieving. We can no longer turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to the epidemic of violence against women. Within the mere span of less than 2 months, 2 women in our community have lost their lives at the hand of domestic violence. This is not an anomaly. This is a reality. Globally, an estimated 736 million women, almost 1 in 3, have been subjected to physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both at least once in their life. In Michigan, 36% of women experience intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner rape, and/or intimate partner stalking in their lives. That's more than 1 in 3. These figures do not include sexual harassment. The pandemic, worsened an already horrible situation. Lockdown and limited access to resources created a greater likelihood of women being subjected to abusive partners. October is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month. This body, at our last meeting, supported its yearly resolution to bring awareness to this issue. While this acknowledgement is made with great sincerity, words are no longer enough. We must do more. Action is needed. It is long overdue. I urge this body and our community at large to take a stand to end violence against women. Less than 40% of women who experience violence seek help. For those, for those suffering at the hand of abuse, it is not your fault. You do not have to endure this fate. There is help. Please reach out to family, friends, law enforcement, or organizations like Locally Safe House, which can be reached at 995-5444, or the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-7233, or you can text them at 88788. To every victim, you did not deserve this. To every grieving family, I am so sorry. Together, we can and will create hope and safety for women. Thank you. Excuse me.
Appreciate your comments. Mr. Seal?
Thank you, Your Honor. It's kind of hard to go forward after that. We, last Wednesday, the Health Improvement Task Force met over at the Saline Library. The major topic of discussion was a presentation by Sunshine Lambert about trying to find funding to resurrect some walking maps of the city. We had a lot of interesting ideas. I think people are going to go forth and try and flesh out some of those ideas and maybe come back at the subsequent meeting on October the 25th, I think, again at the library on what further action we can take in that regard. And that's all I have, Your Honor.
Very good. Mr. Kamara-Sulak, excuse me, any reports, announcements, or statements?
Yes, I'd like to thank Mayor Pro Tem Dillon for reading that terrible statistics and the heartfelt awareness and acknowledging that domestic violence is a big problem. It's more than a problem. It's an epidemic. And it was very, very well stated. And I implore everybody to think seriously about what happens to so many women and young children. I would really like to be part of the Domestic Violence and Awareness Task Force. I think this is something that we have to do. Things have to change, and change can happen by little steps, and I think we all care about our community, the women, the girls, all the LGBTQ community, and that we need to treat others justly and just be good human beings. I also have a statement, however different, in regards to the Indigenous People resolution that the city of Saline DEI brought to the council last year, that being renewed in the council agenda. The DEI committee wants to speak on it because of the importance of that day and having it replace Columbus Day. We, the City of Saline DEI committee, would like to go further and acknowledge the land that we sit on in Saline and the greater Washtenaw County occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwa, Odawa, and the Potawatomi people. I apologize for mispronouncing any of those tribes. We are currently situated on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw, which took 6 million acres of land from a tribe. We will be coming forward to council with an ask and recommendation of doing a land acknowledgement at the beginning of all city council meetings, as well as a specific action to match our words. Land acknowledgements or land recognitions serve to illuminate ongoing Indigenous presence, as well as recognize and counter settler colonial legacies of violence and land expropriation. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments on the recently adopted Indigenous peoples, is that the terminology we used?
Yes.
Resolution that was approved this evening. We do appreciate the work that DEI has done on that. We do also acknowledge the very compelling comments and statements that have been made tonight and throughout the past several days pertaining to a recent incident in Saline and the importance of raising awareness and doing an educational campaign specific to domestic violence. It is an epidemic that plagues not only our region but also our nation and the world. The city clerk is researching. There was a domestic violence task force conceived in the late 1990s. We're yet to determine whether that was done under Mayor Coos or Mayor Driscoll, but we're trying to find more information about that, specifically the outcome of that initiative. And as was mentioned by some of my colleagues earlier tonight, Chief Radzik has taken the lead on making some connections to contacts she has pertaining to domestic violence. And I think there will be a meeting and hopefully a presentation at one of our upcoming council meetings. But we will have future discussions and debates about an initiative. I think most of us agree, probably all of us agree, that that is important and timely and something that we should definitely move forward on. So unless there are additional reports or announcements, we will proceed now to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any person may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but not required, of course, to state his or her name and address for the record.
Good evening. Changming Fan, local resident, local social entrepreneur. As all of you said and have confidence, tonight is another thing, another day we should mark. Keep in our memory forever. Saline is such a beautiful city, great people, but a lot of things happen. It's out of control. City of Saline, under the leadership of you, Mayor, have done quite a lot of work, but not enough. That's why I'm here. I rise, support Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. Everything you said is out of my heart. I totally agree with you, which is also brought up. Another thing that we need, update our strategy. I cannot wait for the strategic meeting plan. There are some error, maybe we had to correct it. Either the same time, 5 p.m., same day of 2 meetings. I hope that is not the error. To support the strategic plan we are going to do, and here I have this 1 gigabyte data, pictures. June 1st, joint meeting between Board of Education of Saline School and the city. This set the foundation of the new future strategic plan. I encourage Dylan, you can distribute it. Michael already distributed the Board of Education meeting, so I want to give to you at the end of this speech. Second thing is, we have a lot of things need to do. Do I have 20 seconds?
51 seconds.
Thank you. I think that we should inherit the great legacy of Saline, the founding father, Ulrich Riston. Build this city, build a village. We have so many things we can do, but we haven't done it yet. Dam is the remover, is the big thing. What I like to offer, a design, a suggestion, don't remove that. Instead, we build a tunnel based on the volunteerism and a lot of good ideas. I will take the chance to present it to you as the University of Michigan City Civil Engineering graduate, and hopefully that you guys can consider my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chang Man. We appreciate your attendance this evening and your comments. You can leave that document on the table. We'll make sure that Council Member or Mayor Pro Tem Dillon retrieves it at the conclusion of tonight's meeting. Thank you. Are there any additional citizen comments? Clerk Royal, did we receive any written comments in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their remarks read at this time? Easy enough. Then please note our upcoming meetings, and if there's nothing further to be brought forward to Saline City Council this evening, the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:19.
So moved.
Moved by Gearboss, seconded by Seal. All those in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.